Hello and welcome to the second day of the Research-to-Practice Transit Symposium. My name is Chad Riding, I'm from Caltrans, and I will be moderating this first session
So if I'm
of the
sharing
event
the
today.
screen, which
To
screen is
remind you, this is the second day of a three-day event, and it is hosted by the Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, the University of Florida Transportation Institute, the UC Davis Transit Research Center, part of the Institute of Transportation Studies, the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA, the Mineta Transportation Institute, and CTOC, the Center for Equitable Transit-Oriented Communities. The schedule for today, we are first privileged to hear from Leslie Richards, the Executive Manager of the SEPTA, the Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. Then that will be followed by a 15-minute break at 1:15 p.m. Eastern or 10:15 a.m. Pacific. We will have a special double session about women in transit, moderated by Drs. Hillary Nixon and Carrie Watkins, and with speakers Susan O'Donnell, Catherine Hetty, Salma Rosenthal, Jennifer Easton, Melissa Dow, Deanna Jones, Mary Rose Fissinger, Nicole Waldheim, Harley Cooper, and Chelsea Richter. We'll then have a 15-minute break while we will return at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, for a session on homelessness and transit, moderated by Suresh Ratnam from Caltrans, with speakers Kenneth Divers, also from SEPTA, Jerome Kiriazi, and John MacArthur. Again, thank you very much to our sponsors, Caltrans, the UC Davis Transit Research Center, APTA, University of Florida Transportation Institute, Mineta Transportation Institute, and CTOC, the Center for Equitable Transit-Oriented Communities. Thank you very much to the members of the steering committee who helped organize this event. We met regularly and we coordinated on themes, speakers, everybody else. Thanks also to Caltrans employees, Wendy Moran, Maddie Davis, and Caitlin Tuchansky, who coordinated on advertising and graphic design. Thanks again to the participants for today, our speakers, panelists, and moderators. For those of you that are members of the American Institute of Certified Planners, or AICP, there are certification maintenance credits available through the symposium. You can find the link on the symposium website, or you can search for Research to Practice on their website, and that will take you to all of the separate sessions for this event. If you have any questions, or if you experience any technical issues, please feel free to reach out at pm2.research@dot.ca.gov, and we will be monitoring that mailbox for any questions, comments, etc. that come through. For all of our events today, we will be at least taking some questions, so feel free to share that with us. And again, thank you very much for your continued support of the symposium. So we'll go ahead and start with our presentation by Leslie Richards. Let me go ahead and give a short bio of Leslie. Leslie is the CEO and General Manager of, as I said, SEPTA, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. Leslie is the 11th General Manager of SEPTA, the 6th largest public transportation agency in the US, with a budget of more than $2 billion and a vast network of 9,500 employees that enable the 5 million residents of the greater Philadelphia region to connect to each other. SEPTA operates across 6 transportation modes and has 2,800 vehicles in service, 285 subway and rail stations, and 1,300 bus and trolley stops and 150 routes. Prior to joining SEPTA, Richards was the first woman secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, one of the largest and most innovative transportation agencies in the US, A staunch advocate for women and diversity in transportation and government, Richards has been recognized for her leadership in the industry and commitment to public service. Richards is a graduate of Brown University, where she concentrated in economics and urban studies. She also received a Master's of Regional Planning from the University of Pennsylvania. So we are so privileged to hear from you, Leslie. Thank you so much for being with here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And, right there. To hit that again. Okay. Let me know if you're seeing it.
Yes, we are.
Ah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. Truly, truly appreciate it. I am thrilled to talk to you about how we use data, evidence-based research to make our decisions here at SEPTA. So I'm going to go to the first slide here, as was mentioned a little bit in our introduction here. So first of all, let me just say good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're signing in from. And again, want to extend a big thank you to the hosts and coordinators of today's Research-to-Practice Transit Symposium, particularly the Mineta Transportation Institute, ACTA, and TRB for asking me to join you. It's always beneficial when thought leaders collaborate to bring people together to keep conversations moving forward, no matter the topic. And today's conversation around research and action is definitely one that's close to my heart, and it's at the foundation of how I and my leadership team at SEPTA make decisions. So we're committed to data-driven decision making so that we can make the most of all of our resources, which we never have enough here, and the opportunities, because we want to serve our communities in the best way possible. So while I know many of you may be familiar with SEPTA, but just for those who are not, I just wanted to put this chart up. We are the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Agency. We serve the city of Philadelphia and its surrounding suburbs. Our system is generally located on the East Coast on the United States, approximately 1.5 hours south of New York City and 3 hours north of Washington, D.C. We are the 6th largest transit agency in the nation, has been mentioned, with over 9,000 employees and a budget of $2 billion. We include 2,800 vehicles, 150 routes, 285 subway and rail stations, and 13,000 bus and trolley stops. We make approximately 790,000 weekday trips on a daily basis, and our ridership has recovered to about 75% of pre-COVID levels. Over the next half hour or so, I'll be touching on how research and data are essential to effectively and efficiently moving projects forward in the 4 following areas. I'm going to touch on data-driven strategic planning, peer learning and pilots, partnerships, technology trials and setbacks, and then end with community engagement and advocacy. So data and research play a pivotal role in shaping efficient, sustainable, and user-centered systems. Research-driven insights help improve rider experience by forecasting peak demand and managing resources accordingly. Real-time passenger data and feedback allow transit systems to adjust services dynamically to improve, pardon me for a second, to improve punctuality and convenience. Over the past 2 years, SEPTA has talked to more than 20,000 people about how to make transit more useful, and message has been clear that people want more reliable and more accessible service. So in Center City, traffic congestion, double parking, illegal parking at bus stops makes meeting these needs very difficult. And that's why we're investing more than $150 million in infrastructure improvement designs to complement transit service across our region, with a particular focus on making service more accessible, faster, and more reliable. So we analyzed demographic, environmental, and technological trends, to create strategic plans to accommodate these shifts. And this includes understanding the impact of electric vehicle adoption, shifting work patterns, and future population growth. We've done just this with our SEPTA Forward Strategic Plan. It continues to guide us in our decision making, our planning efforts, and it's the lens through which we gauge our successes and our challenges. We realized that we needed to take a fresh look at the effectiveness and efficiency in serving the changing needs of our communities. People now need more options for transit, for flexible work days, shift work, medical appointments, and for other lifestyle needs. The demand has shifted from 9 to 5 work schedule, and we need to shift with it. In evaluating the trends and through human input, we knew that we would only be able to better meet our riders' needs and support the region's communities and businesses by revamping our network to deliver consistent, frequent service and connect to diverse destinations. As a result, we have and continue to research and gather data around all aspects of travel on SEPTA. And as we roll out more services and tools underpinned by new technologies, we gain access to more and more data that can transform how we plan, operate, and maintain the SEPTA system to the benefit of our riders. Real-time data from sensors, GPS, and ridership patterns have helped us adjust these routes, manage congestion, and optimize the deployment of vehicles, such as buses and trains. Included in our strategic plan, which is focused on the goal of creating this lifestyle network, are 2 large projects. And that's what you see here: Bus Network Redesign, which is also referred to as Bus Revolution as we were going through the first phases, and our Regional Rail Master Plan, which I'm going to speak about later in this presentation. Design our bus networks to better align with ridership and demand. Important to our process was gathering information, input, and data through myriad sources. We completed a detailed analysis of the existing system, evaluating both the market for transit service and the performance of existing routes. This analysis was accompanied by exclusive public outreach through the city and the region. The project kicked off in 2021, and up until fall of 2023, SEPTA held 12 transit talks, 40 community meetings, 30 virtual community conversations, 67 group meetings, presentations and briefings, 63 pop-ups, and project bus events at bus stops, transit centers, and community events. So 10 public hearings. And if you're doing the math, that's well over 200 public events. In the spring of 2024, we coordinated with Philadelphia City Council members to hold an additional series of 8 community meetings and 1 virtual meeting for residents to meet the needs of the project team of those who weren't able to attend in person. Meetings were held across Philadelphia and included a presentation by SEPTA staff, followed by an informal discussion of route changes. Following spring of 2024 engagement, SEPTA reviewed community feedback alongside fall of 2023, ridership data, and market analysis. SEPTA's Bus Revolution team updated the bus network based on this process, and the revised network balances recent public input with the overarching goals of the project. The end result is a bus network that will be more useful for more people, and the updated network will improve access to frequent transit across the Philadelphia region. The new network will have about 30% more frequent bus routes, 43 frequent bus routes compared to 33 today, and 18% more bus riders will have access to frequent bus routes. That's within a quarter of a mile than have access today. And with these frequent improvements, 99% of current bus riders will maintain access to bus service. That's within a quarter mile or a 5-minute walk. And here you can see all of our public engagement efforts.
We also use peer learning and pilots. So peer review learning best practices from other systems who are achieving what we hope to and beyond. In much of the rest of the world, commuter rail has been extensively modernized and reimagined to be more efficient to operate, easier to use, and useful for many more kinds of trips. International examples show us the range of what is possible. And here are some of the other systems that are using this type of learning as well. So systems in North America have been looking at how San Francisco's Caltrain is electrifying and implementing frequent service, how Toronto's Go Transit is shifting from a peak focus pattern to all-day service. Boston is implementing clock-based schedules. Dallas-Fort Worth has integrated rail and bus fares along the entire region. And Metra in Chicago is piloting a $6 all-day pass, and that's a reduction from a $10 pass. So some of these serve as replicable models, but most show us what is possible so that we can innovate scenarios that fit into our specific conditions, resources, and infrastructure. Additionally, looking at what worked as well as what didn't work, and in what scenarios are equally as important as we evaluate what our next steps are or our next strategic project is. Overlaying data with real-world experiences is key to making informed decisions. SEPTA also provides over 400,000 unlinked trips on our bus routes every single day. And every weekday, that's part of the 790,000 total trips every weekday that we provide. So this is 51% of our total average trips. Clearly, buses are a huge part of how we serve our ridership. So in order for SEPTA to reach our sustainability goals in tandem with our service goals, we've committed to striving for a full transition of our bus fleet to all zero-emission buses by the year 2040. And we've set the enormous goal of being carbon neutral in the authority by 2050. With 8 main bus districts and a fleet of over 1,200 buses, the ZEB transition will be a major undertaking lasting 15 years or more. While we suspect that the fleet will include a combination of battery electric buses and fuel cell electric buses, we are just at the beginning of our ZEB journey and learning a lot about what we don't know through investigation, conversations, and through several pilot programs. Through this process, we are gaining a deeper understanding of how to build a sustainable, efficient, and dynamic system that is supported by innovative infrastructure, data-driven decision-making, and that also makes the most sense for the needs of our region. For example, we know that both technologies, both FCEB, fuel cell electric, as well as BEB, battery electric buses, are experiencing rapid rates of innovation. But testing what is promised by the TVM, that's the transit vehicle manufacturers, in our specific conditions enables us to make informed implementation decisions. Our operators experience many different conditions across our service area based on their schedules. Our ZEB pilots are helping us to gather relevant data so we can make the best choices for our service conditions, because different types of technologies have different performance characteristics. They have different levels of compatibility with SEPTA's existing bus schedules. In addition to seeing how the vehicles perform in revenue service and whether they operate similarly to our hybrid electric buses, we're also looking at things like how long does the fueling take with hydrogen or electricity, and how does that affect our driver's time on the clock? What would happen if we had to drive the bus to another depot to fuel because there isn't enough space at each depot to deploy a charging or fueling station? The data we are looking at goes beyond just vehicle performance. So we are gathering data around key points like schedule compatibility, vehicle availability, and range. We're also working to learn more about the total costs of implementation, lifetime costs, and operational impacts and costs as these technologies emerge. As we often note, we are lifestyle transit network, and that means more than just how we operate in our depots, but also how we impact the communities that surround us. ZEBs will allow us to minimize our impact and help improve the communities that we serve. As we have learned through other successful initiatives, partnerships are key to addressing large issues like sustainability. We're so grateful for the support we have received through many grants, including a generous USDOT Low-No program grant of $80 million to support the purchase of low to no emission buses. We're also very proud of our sustainability playbook. It's our new framework for sustainability across SEPTA. It provides a 7-year plan for SEPTA with a view of the triple bottom line to maximize the sustainability impact on our business practices, systems, equipment, and facilities. It includes goals and targets to facilitate the strategies and actions that are required today to ensure a sustainable and resilient future. A key first step in building our sustainability playbook was gathering research by engaging key stakeholders to produce a new SEPTA sustainability vision to act as a North Star and organize underneath it the latest goals, targets, and actions. We collected information and feedback from stakeholders and created iterative processes to develop an aligned and ambitious playbook to continue to guide SEPTA's sustainability. SEPTA's sustainability goals and targets were compared to other local and regional sustainability, climate action, and related plans to evaluate respective alignment and overlap with SEPTA's goals. Plans included Philadelphia 2035, Philadelphia Climate Action Playbook, Philadelphia Greenworks Initiative, Philadelphia Transit Plan, Philadelphia Tree Plan, County Sustainable Plans, Connections 2045, PA Climate Action Plan, APTA Guidelines for Climate Action Planning. The Federal Transit Administration launched Phase 3 of its Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge in April of 23. The challenge encourages transit agencies to take bold actions and prioritize investments to cut their GHG emissions to help tackle the climate crisis. In Phase 3, the FTA continues to encourage transit agencies to commit to developing climate action plans that include strategies with measurable goals to achieve GHG emission targets. SEPTA is using best practices and resources within FTA's initiatives to bolster the sustainability playbook to cut GHG emissions. SEPTA's sustainability goals are in many cases consistent with the United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development, 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. SEPTA's sustainability goals include reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving the quality of life for customers and communities. We have several projects to help meet our sustainability goals and reduce its carbon footprint. Elk Hills 1 and 2, a 42 megawatt solar farm in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, generates enough clean energy to meet about 20% of SEPTA's electricity needs. The project is a partnership with LightSource BP, who financed, built, and own the farms. We have rooftop solar installations, 3, with a combined capacity of 2.3 megawatts that provide power to SEPTA shops. And then at our Wayne Junction complex, we have been certified as an ISO 14001, 2015 Environmental and Sustainability Management System Facility. Our micromobility playbook, a framework, increases ridership by accommodating micromobility users. And we have our zero emission bus playbook. And that's the playbook that supports data-driven decision-making toward a zero emission bus fleet. Sustainability in transit must advance operational efficiency, access to opportunity, and environmental protection. So there's a lot to measure, to track, and assess. Data is key, engaging our progress, successes, and gaps. Partnerships with anchor institutions in our region, like Drexel University, University of Pennsylvania, Villanova University, and the National Science Museum for Research, are vital to ensure we are informed on the latest research and able to make decisions based on the best science. I'd like to spend a moment to highlight the importance of partnerships when striving to build the most effective transit opportunities for everyone. Our partnership with the City of Philadelphia for the Zero Fare pilot is one that is invaluable to SEPTA, to our city, and to so many residents who are working to build a more prosperous life. The goal of Zero Fare is to make it easier and more affordable for residents with limited resources to get to work or job interviews, meet caregiving responsibilities, and access health, education, and recreational opportunities. Zero Fare cards cover unlimited trips for 25,000 Philadelphians on the entire SEPTA system. Bus, trolley, subway, regional rail, as well as Access ADA paratransit service for cross-eligible riders through an opt-in mechanism. The program is funded by the City of Philadelphia, and it's one of the most robust and far-reaching Zero Fare initiatives in the country. The program has recorded over 4.3 million trips on SEPTA in the first year, with activity throughout the entire city and in all transit modes. Zero Fare transit activity continues to increase as the pilot program reaches full distribution and more enrolled participants use the benefit. The City of Philadelphia continues to implement the pilot through June 30, 2025, and I can let you know we're already talking about how it might continue and what that might look like. The city, in partnership with the Georgetown University Better Government Lab and the Urban Institute, will evaluate program enrollment and outcomes for participants receiving the fully subsidized transit benefit during the 2-year pilot period. 1-year data shows that nearly 90% of Zero Fare transit trips are on the bus and subway, and 9% of trips on SEPTA trolleys and 3% on regional rail. An analysis of enrolled participant data show that more than half of selected program participants are women, and more than half of everyone enrolled identifies as Black, African American, or of African descent. Most enrolled participants are between the ages of 25 and 35, with nearly a quarter of participants between the ages of 35 and 45. Similar fare-free transit programs in peer cities have shown a range of benefits, including better access to social services, medical support, and employment and educational opportunities. I'm very proud of this program and thrilled that we could partner with the city and giving it a try. Next, wanted to talk about the use of technology, which also has some trials and setbacks, and where we've been successful and where we've had to change a few things as well. So technology is inextricable from modern life, and many riders rely on technology to inform data decisions, navigate across the region. We're continually researching ways for our staff and our infrastructure to work smarter and not harder, with even better results than in the past. While technology should not replace the need for investments in physical infrastructure, it should be seen as an important element of 21st century infrastructure. One of our pilots that clearly demonstrated the value of gathering implementation data through pilots was our Zero Eyes pilot. It was aimed at improving security by detecting weapons. The software was intended to utilize SEPTA station cameras to detect the presence of a weapon on SEPTA property and then alert officials after human confirmation. The pilot program primarily utilized about 1% of our agency's 31,000 cameras, which are a mix of analog and digital devices. All of the selected 300 cameras were posted in 10 high-risk stations and platforms, along with the Market Frankfurt and Broad Street lines. Approximately 50% of the cameras were analog and the remaining cameras were digital. The issue that arose was that the AI software that SEPTA was told was compatible with our legacy infrastructure of analog cameras ended up not being fully compatible. My colleagues at SEPTA worked closely with Zero Eyes. We even extended the 6-month pilot to a full year to iterate on the algorithm to help improve its compatibility with our analog cameras. Ultimately, it was decided that it wouldn't be a good investment to scale up, and we discontinued the program. So instead, SEPTA reappropriated a nearly $5 million state grant to pay for officer overtime, new cameras, and unspecified technologies. So the lessons from technological challenges, obviously understanding the limitations of aging infrastructure. Just so everyone knows, SEPTA is a legacy transit agency. Parts of our system are over 100 years old, and modernizing, especially on the back end of things, it can be difficult. So adapting digital technologies in real world settings, obviously not everything works in all settings. We learned to trust the process of the pilot, and we were not afraid of the results. Our goal is to make data-driven decisions, and sometimes that decision is we have to stop. It's not going to work like we thought, and we have to either course correct or pivot or try something else. So we look for other ways to accomplish our goals. Again, the translation from a plane into real life always uncovers gaps as well as unforeseen benefits. With this project, we were happy we started with a pilot, and we were able to be good stewards of our resources, both economic and human. No pilot is a failed pilot if you continue to learn from it, regardless of the outcome. And that's what the Zero Eyes pilot presented for us here. And the last topic I want to touch on is community engagement and advocacy. So here we come back to reimagining regional rail and community engagement. As we work to create a vision for the future of regional rail service that is more useful to more people, we've been talking with community members about what works well and what could be improved. While the first round of survey responses were coming in, we noticed that we were not hearing from certain communities. The participants largely reflected the current regional rail ridership, white and higher income, but we knew we needed to hear from others too. We quickly created a series of pop-up events at stations and in communities surrounding stations where participation was low so that we could reach current and potential riders. And it worked. It resulted in more women and BIPOC filling out the survey. This was the first time SEPTA made this type of effort to be intentional in targeting outreach to BIPOC people for their rail ridership. This was new, and we learned from the experience. To make sure that we proactively reached out to these groups in the following phases, we added in-depth focus groups to foster incisive discussions with people who currently do not ride regional rail but could benefit from its service. We heard similar themes, particularly that affordability, integration with other services, and frequency of service were the biggest barriers to ridership. We also heard a consistent perception that regional rail, it's just not for me, particularly from people of lower income and BIPOC residents. What we heard in these conversations directly impacted how SEPTA not only talked about services, but also the fare policies. SEPTA changed its fare policy effective July 2023 so that passes for buses and metro, subways, and trolleys were no longer separate from passes for regional rail service in Zone 1. Zone 1 covers the majority of the city of Philadelphia. By integrating these two products, we broke down a historical barrier between the two systems, providing current bus and metro riders with access to dozens of regional rail stations and faster service at no additional cost. Transit is essential to the economic health and well-being of the communities we serve, as well as the region we are a part of. The broad impact of public transit is often underestimated or unrealized. It's vital to communicate regularly with elected officials on all levels to ensure there is clear understanding of the relationship between transit and the economy so that funding streams are consistently available to our system, safe, efficient, sustainable, and effective. Understanding the impact and role the transit plays in our communities and our economy is key to advocating effectively for sustained funding investment. Every single resident, whether they ride a bus, railway, or trolley every day or not, benefits from public transit systems. Public transit plays an essential role in the lives of many as they get to work, go to school, take care of their health, visit loved ones, and take advantage of all that towns and cities have to offer. Transit allows seniors to age in place while maintaining their freedom and independence. In Philadelphia, demand for transit services continues to rise and recover from the pandemic. The total number of passengers carried on transit increased 18.5% from fiscal 23, and that's according to PennDOT reporting data. This trend is understandable given that more than 60% of transit riders say they have no other means to get to work, school, family engagements, or medical appointments. But transit's impact is not only in moving people and creating access to everyday needs. In Pennsylvania, the transit industry generates $5.4 billion in economic impact for the Commonwealth annually, allowing Pennsylvania-based businesses and the Pennsylvanians they hire to thrive. PA Transit supports nearly 39,000 jobs within the state, and these jobs are a combination of direct employment by transportation providers and indirect jobs supported by their spending. Over the past 5 years, Pennsylvania public transit agencies have purchased $2.61 billion in goods and services from PA companies in 67 counties, an average annual investment of over $500 million per year. And this impact is what makes funding transit so important to the overall economic health of Pennsylvania and through the entire country. So just to wrap up, a lot of information. My experiences tell me that to continue utilizing and modernizing infrastructure with a data-driven approach to best serve our communities and our region, we need to understand how and why and when and where people are moving. We can use our resources in the most efficient, effective, and sustainable ways to meet those needs. Research and data are essential for building that understanding. It's important to test theories derived from data analysis in real-world situations to see where the gaps appear from paper to practice. Learning not only from data and pilots, but also from peers moves us closer to the 360-degree evaluation of a new initiative. And finally, engaging with partners to create innovative solutions to critical challenges helps build the community consensus and deepen our knowledge to move us closer to where we want to be. Thank you very much, and I'm open for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Really appreciate that fantastic presentation. I'm going to share my screen to share the email address for those who may have questions again. Let me go ahead and share that. So again, pm2.research@dot.ca.gov. is the address that you can send your questions to. Again, pm2.research@dot.ca.gov. So we already have a good deal of questions for you relating to the topic. Yes. So one question that I actually personally had, I'll be selfish and take the first question, is what are some key performance indicators that you look at when you make decisions about the transit system? And then, so what performance indicators, and then how have those indicators changed over your career as you've gained greater knowledge through research or practice?
Sure. So look, we use a lot of KPIs. Obviously, on-time performance is very important to us. We also look at missed trips. We look at, when we're evaluating workforce issues, we're looking at things from absenteeism to shortages, right? Where are we with headcount? How many, as everyone's having workforce shortages throughout transit and in other areas as well. While I'm talking about workforce, I'm just going to throw a few other things out there. In our hiring and our retention, we're also looking at, right, like how long does it take us to bring somebody on and get them, in the seat. When you hire a bus operator, right, we're trying to fill a shortage there. They also have to go through training, and it's do they have a CDL license, like all of those types of things that are important as well. And then as we're evaluating, I touched on it a little bit with the zero emission bus fleet that we're working toward. It's not surprising. We're finding that, maybe our trips aren't, or one fueling isn't lasting as long as the manufacturer said, or maybe the environment here is a little bit different. Maybe the hills that we have to climb on certain routes, or maybe the stop and go traffic that we have in certain neighborhoods. So those are the types of key performance indicators that we're looking at. And we've seen. I started in January of 2020, so I had a few months pre-pandemic. But the rest of my career here has been either during or as we recover from dealing with the pandemic. So obviously, I already spoke about the KPIs on our ridership. I mentioned our highest daily rides that we've hit. I mentioned how many, where our bus is in ridership recovery. And there we have really looked at the data of each mode, how many trips, and we look at, who's using us, how are they using us? And that also is what helped us when we saw the different needs going from 9 to 5 commuting, and we saw it, throughout the day. So that really helped us with the bus network redesign as well. So those are the types of changes, that we've seen. Luckily, we have seen that our work, and we're trying really hard to bring back that ridership, is working. And we've done everything. I mentioned our low fare partnership with the city. We also have a program called SEPTA Key Advantage that we kicked off after the pandemic hit. And that is working with employers to figure out the exact cost where they can provide free transit for employees as they come back into the office. And that's been huge. We currently have almost 100,000 riders who get their transit either at a severely discounted amount or free from their employers. And that's been really helpful as well.
Wow, that's phenomenal. 100,000 is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And of course, having started in January 2020, basically your entire tenure at the head of SEPTA has been during times when key performance indicators might change radically, and what you prioritize may be completely different through that whole, 4+ year process. Another question is about really, I would say, looking at the future. And we have a couple questions about this. Is what emerging technologies do you believe will significantly impact public transportation in the near future and how is SEPTA preparing to utilize these advancements? So in the presentation, you talk a lot about zero emission vehicle technologies and the camera technologies that, was a pilot project that you learned from. What are some other things that you're kind of looking around the corners and seeing what's coming down the pipeline that you'd like to take advantage of?
Yeah. One thing we're currently testing right now, as well as other transit agencies, SEPTA is not the only one. We're using a firm called Hayden AI. We're using AI technology. And that is, we have cameras outside of our buses. We have a big problem here in the Philadelphia region of people parking in our bus lanes, like red painted, dedicated bus lanes. It's important for us to have those lanes in order to perform reliable one-time service. And so we have the cameras outside, and they will see if someone's parked in that lane. They will grab the license plate number and automatically issue a ticket. And that is through a partnership with the parking authority here. That's not a SEPTA. We don't write our own tickets. So those tickets go directly to the parking authority, which is a state-run agency here in the Philadelphia area. And we're thrilled. First of all, just announcing it has reduced the number of people who park in our bus lanes or park like on corners, which makes it very difficult for our buses to turn because they know that they're going to be getting these tickets. But I think using technology in that way, I think there's a lot that can be done. And there's a lot that can, be done that would increase, reliability and the way that our system operates. Obviously, I firmly believe in both a hydrogen cell as well as battery electric. I think we're going to have a mix of that coming in. I do think we're going to have to work with the bus manufacturers. Right now, there are only 2 in the US, and just a few years ago there were 9, maybe even a dozen. And so as the suppliers go down, our choices will be diminished as well. So it's very important that we have that competitive process as well. So we're looking toward it. Obviously electrification is going to play a big role, and also like automated technologies as well, specifically in our rail uses. I was in Paris just last year, and train comes, there's nobody operating it, right? And the trains also come every 2 minutes, which is wonderful. So we're looking at that technology. And then the last thing I'll say to that question is we're also having, quality of life issues here at SEPTA. We're having those who are unhoused. We're having people riding our system, without a destination, just getting on. We have those with mental health issues. We have those with drug addictions. And it's really important. We're trying to, make sure people aren't smoking on our system as well. So one of the things we're testing right now are new fare gates. Again, we're looking at Paris as an example, where they have fare gates that are go from the bottom, much lower, much higher than our current ones. Our turnstile system was designed to make our system accessible, because that's what we want. We want to be accessible to everybody. Unfortunately, it makes it easy for people to fare evade, and people take advantage of it. And it's something that we're working on. But these new fare gates that we're testing come with cameras on top, and we are analyzing the data to see how people evade, how often they evade, what times a day are they evading, which stops. And we just did a pilot at 1 station, and now the board has approved a pilot for 9 more. So we're looking forward to using that data to help us.
I wanted to return, and that's all very, very interesting points. All of these are things that we've seen in California too. I know BART has been installing new fare gates. One of the major pushes that you mentioned is the electrification. We have a very aggressive zero emission vehicle mandate here in California, and we've been purchasing several buses, not only from California, but other agencies throughout the country and the world have been kind of engaging in this. What kind of lessons learned have you looked at in that sphere of purchasing new zero emission vehicles and what pitfalls maybe to avoid and how to implement them better?
Yeah, look, we're all working together, and that's really wonderful. And we're so thrilled with the federal government IIJA bill out there with all the no grants and the ability to test in so many different areas. So we're all sharing our data. Obviously, we can learn what other agencies are doing. One of the great things about transit is we're really not in competition with each other in that we're fighting for a given rider on a given day, right? I just want to make sure everyone, we are in competition because the healthier we are, the regions where we serve are healthier, right? So the businesses we've tracked and the people, so I don't want to take that out of the conversation, but if someone is about to, hop on one of our subway lines, it's not like they're thinking, oh, should I take, the Boston way or the BART way, or, so, so it's very easy for us to share. And we all know that this is part of our future. And so there's a zero emission bus task force. APTA has put together a lot of good information, as well as all of the researchers. And we're trying to learn as much as we can together, again, because we want to keep the competitiveness of the suppliers there, right? We want to figure out if we can all agree what's best, and then we can have maybe just one model or two, right? We don't need 90 different ways, right, to create electric buses. And that's part of what has really killed the competitiveness and the ability of more bus manufacturers to stay in the field when they're responsible for keeping, so many different models, and not everyone's buying what they're producing or having to keep in their inventory. It's hard for them to stay in business.
Yeah, I've never really understood why so many buses in general, but particularly electric buses, when they're so expensive, have been almost like custom purchases. It seems like that's something
It doesn't
you'd
make
want to
sense.
mass manufacture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also the extra weight of them, right? So it depends where your infrastructure is. For us, the challenges are we're Philadelphia. A lot of our roadways were designed before cars were invented. So it's more the width of a horse cartway. It's not the width of a car. So it's very tight in some areas. So that's pretty difficult, right? How do they maneuver? Where can they fuel, right? How long do they have to last on one fueling exchange? So look, there's all of these difficulties that we have to work together on.
Yeah, and one of the things we're looking at here too, with university partners here at Caltrans, is looking at some of the new battery technologies that are coming down the pipeline. Steady state batteries, where they may be able to get double or triple the range that we have today on a similar cost. So we're really looking forward to some of those advancements that are really just around the corner and that can be implemented here in transit and other technologies.
Yeah. On the weight issue, I also just want to add, look, the weight limits on our bridges are a problem too, depending where we are. Sometimes if you go through a smaller township and maybe you have a township-owned bridge where your route is, those types of things have to be calculated as well because of the extra weight of those of the batteries.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit with our what I believe will probably be our final question, is when you outreach to the public, you've definitely made strides in creating new creative ways to meet underserved populations, people that may not have had that opportunity to provide input into the process. How do you best communicate some of these cutting edge technologies to the public? And what strategies have proven successful, what have not, and how can that be improved in the future?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we try to get information out to places where people go, right? We used to be able to rely on libraries, it's not as common anymore. Obviously, we try to get information out. If it's about buses, we can get it out to the bus stops. If it's on a subway, we get it out to our platforms. We have monitors that are out there, and we're looking at ways to get information out to the system. We work with our elected officials, of course. We are always happy to attend meetings that are already happening out in the communities. Senior centers, we really try to weave our message into what's already happening in the community and give updates. We find that's most useful. I think you saw in some of the pictures that I showed, one of my favorite things is there was this little cart going through a corridor on one of our rail cars. So that cart was designed to be able to go through the width of where our, the middle of where our seats are. And it had information on it. And we were able to hand information out to our riders while they were riding. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's really important. And we make ourselves available to go out again. So on the bus network redesign that I mentioned, we realized that we were going to have a hard time, or it was going to be difficult for the board to vote yes on that, with so many people feeling like they didn't have access. So then we did that last round in communities. We asked council members to schedule locations. We did all of the work around it. We didn't rush it. We took an extra several months to do that, because initially someone's like, well, just do that and then we'll come vote next month. And I just let them know that's not really going to be a meaningful, productive dialogue around the questions that they have. And so we wanted to make sure that it would get us to a good place where our board members then could make an informed decision with the information that they were given. Because these are tough decisions. It's never like 100% I should make that vote, right? You want to make it easy for the board to make those decisions.
And the latest information, the latest research, the latest data is able to help guide those decision makers as they make those tough choices.
Yeah.
So really fascinating. Thank you so much, Leslie, for coming to speak to us today. Really appreciated those fascinating insights from Pennsylvania. Again, thank you so much. And we hope to hear from SEPTA in the future. We actually have 2 more SEPTA people on today. So
I'm so glad. Thanks for including us. I'm so proud of the work we're doing here. And it's just lovely that you're allowing us to share it and learn from others as well.
So fantastic. Thanks again, Leslie. Now we will go on to our 15-minute break and at I believe 2:15 p.m. Eastern, 10:15 a.m. Pacific. We'll come back with a double session on women in transit. Again, thank you very much.
Great. So welcome, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here for this session on day 2 of the 2024 Research-to-Practice Transit Symposium. My name is Dr. Hillary Nixon, and I am Deputy Executive Director at the Monetas Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. I also serve as chair of the Transportation Research Board Standing Committee on Women and Gender in Transportation. Joining me today as co-moderator is Dr. Carrie Watkins, Associate Professor and co-director of the Transit Research Center at the University of California at Davis. This session focuses on the topic of women and transit and how research can inform improved transit planning and service delivery. We will start the session with 4 presentations from experts in the field. These presentations cover a range of topics, from helping us to better understand women's travel patterns and why we need to take that into consideration for transit planning, as well as specific efforts from different agencies, including BART's Not One More Girl campaign, efforts at SEPTA and New Jersey Transit that focus on women as well as the LGBTQ+ community, and work through the Transit Cooperative Research Program that is developing a practical resource for public transportation agencies, planning organizations, and their partnering organizations to improve the travel experience of women and all travelers, foster gender-inclusive decision-making, and increase the use of fixed-route transit services, microtransit, on-demand services, and non-motorized travel connection. Today's session is actually a continuation of a session that we held during the 2023 Research-to-Practice Symposium, that looked at the topic of women in transit. The link and QR code here on this slide take you to the recording from last year's session, which I would certainly encourage you to check out after today's discussion. So after today's presentations, we are going to bring all of the speakers back together for a panel discussion to further explore how their research informs practice and to dive a bit deeper into this important topic. So let's get started with our featured presentation. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Jennifer Easton from Bay Area Rapid Transit. So Jennifer Easton directs the art program for San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit, where she is responsible for developing and implementing the art program that includes both permanent artworks, temporary art programming, and social programs that integrate artists to enhance rider and community experiences of transit. She has led numerous projects where transit and art were integrated to enhance customer, community, and employee experience, safety, and engagement. Jennifer, I will turn it over to you, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation.
There we go. I was having a mute problem. Apologies. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and hopefully it will become abundantly kind of clear why an art program manager is giving a presentation today. But I will say that I have been partnered in this program with Alicia Trost from our communications, the Chief Communications Officer for BART, on this whole journey of Not One More Girl. So it's really been a collaborative in an exploration of the rider experience for young women and gender divergent youth as far as how they experience the transit system. And I just will say that I will use the term girls throughout this presentation, but it does cover a broad spectrum of gender identifications, and that is who's been our focal groups in this whole project. So Not One More Girl is focused on tackling sexual harassment in transit, specifically for this teen to kind of mid-20s age range. It's led by a BIPOC youth-led initiative around this topic. So it's really the groups that have led us have been at the forefront of this dialogue outside of transit and brought this question to us. It's centered a lot of solutions that were not police-based and really expanded our thinking around what safety is as far as what we can provide as an agency and with the lens we were using at the time and how we can expand that lens. And one of the things you'll see in here is that we really started to focus on data, what delayed data we were collecting, when we were collecting it, and how we were collecting it, and how that informs our solutions and our further questions around the issue. And as I said, it includes initiatives and partnerships with community-based organizations that are deeply rooted in our communities. So one of the things that we started with is really meeting with the youth and them helping us define how we reach the community. And so it was not just in stations. We went out to community events. We really started having dialogues around this. And again, it was youth reaching out to youth is what we found was really the most effective. They created these wonderful healing kits. We did a lot of art engagement around this. So there were poets, the designs were designed by local artists, really trying to find a language to dialogue, in which to dialogue where the youth felt safe coming up to us and being, kind of, as you can understand, this is a really emotional topic for a lot of people. One of our initial outreach events, we had data around harassment that was more not specific to us, but and what we found is people came up to us and were saying, "Oh, that's really actually triggering to me." So we kind of moved the boards away that said, this percentage of women have been attacked in transit broadly. So that was a really interesting learning experience for us. So again, this wasn't an easy automatic dialogue to have. It was a big lift and learning experience for us as an agency. And it was truly led by these community-based organizations and had us connecting with hundreds of people at the different events. So one thing you'll see here, this has been our ongoing data collection, and we do it in our passenger surveys. So this happens on a quarterly basis. And usually we reach about 2,000 people each quarter. And as you can see, when we say we're dropping the phases, that's when we're doing in station or in train, the artwork, which you'll see later, kind of bringing attention to the activations and dialogues about what we're thinking about for this work. So we're really, as we launch these campaigns, we're seeing dips that happen in the reporting of sexual harassment. So we're seeing this having an effect, an awareness and an effect on kind of people paying attention. And as you'll see, what we've done in the program around teaching people intervention strategies or just showing people that we're kind of keeping our eyes on this, we're even seeing that this is reflecting in our numbers about people's experiencing sexual harassment in the system.
Can I pop in? Oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer. Just to pop in one.
Yeah.
Can you make sure you're stepping down the slides, because we're seeing that screen? We're not seeing the movement. If you are
good
moving.
Lord. So
nope,
I'm
just wanted to make sure.
Is this moving at all?
Now it is.
Okay.
There.
Wow. All right.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping in. Yikes. So I'll just leave it here then on the survey data. So you can see that. I don't know if you saw that. So this was just showing the kind of after we launched our campaigns. And then we saw that was our first campaign, a significant drop. And then this one was more trended around the same way, but we definitely saw a little drop in that area. So just interesting to see some of this data that starts to, the phase one was really the most significant one for us. And then, so the other bit of the research that led to, in addition to doing the outreach, we also did some, the community organizations helped us look at changes in policy. What we did is we added sexual harassment to our prohibitions on our code of conduct. So it allowed, these are the things that allow our safety officers or police officers to step in and actually remove people from trains if they need to, or have an impact. So this is posted in all our trains now and our stations. We started collecting the data. We launched our Unarmed Ambassadors program, and we actually had some of the youth participate in the hiring panels of those ambassadors. Added sexual harassment BART app, our BART Watch app. So we allow people to report both sexual harassment as it's occurring or after it's occurred. So it's another way for us to collect data that way. And we were the pilot agency for a new California policy mandating surveys about street harassment. So part of this work led to two legislative pieces in the state of California that is now called the Mineta Survey broadly, because it was developed by the Mineta Institute and is currently being implemented right now throughout the state. So as the slide says, putting research into practice, here what we have is that some of the things that what the girls said, and then our reactions to it, and how that has led to a better environment that we're seeing for the transit riders and broadlies. Creating a campaign around bystander intervention, which I'll talk about shortly. Empty trains are scary, so we began running shorter trains, and we were able to use that concern. That is not the only reason we're running shorter trains, but it was one of the contributing factors to our decision to do so. The night waits are more concerning for these young women. And so one of the things that we're doing now is reducing peak service and increasing evening service to kind of keep the balance of the budget the same, but respond to those concerns. And then the emergency button, which you can see here in the photo, we actually have one, but we needed to increase awareness of it. So what's one of the things that we're working on right now is creating some how to bring attention to this kind of anonymous button. And it's just interesting to think about as we talk about, you know, environmental design or how we start to think about these things is like, sure, an emergency button was put there, but we really don't call attention to it. And why did that happen? And so thinking about kind of the things that we take for granted or we just don't think about, and using this lens to give us an opportunity for expanding our own sort of you know, view of how transit safety looks and feels. So this just as our first campaign, our phase 1 campaign, was to increase awareness. And again, here you have the artists, where the artist steps in, and the program was designed by a local designer, and using the youth from our campaign as the models for the work. So then this became like all over our system. We have buttons, we have things we gave out at the events, and it's still in, you know, we still see it in our system from different places, and just kind of giving a face and a name to harassment, and that we're thinking about it, and that we're, you know, it's something that is top of mind for us, and there's a zero tolerance for it. We also, in phase 2, stepped into frontline staff engagement. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this is that the frontline staff, and this was our transit ambassadors, our crisis intervention specialists, and our train operators and station agents, and in concert with our union leadership, allowed us to have dialogue with them. And one of the key things that came out of that is that a lot of the women in these roles were actually experiencing their own harassment from riders, or just getting to and from their cars after work, especially at the end of the late night shift. So we really had to take a step back and work within the organization to have that dialogue. Is like, how do we expect our staff to support our riders who are experiencing this when they are carrying their own trauma around this? And it's interesting that there's this recent national attention to transit worker safety, and you know, one of the questions is, will sexual harassment be in that mix of transit worker safety? So just some of the things that really kind of came to our attention is like, what support can we provide in this situation, and what's the situation we're dealing with there? And so phase 2 was called Our Story of Courage, and it really focused on the experience of the bystander, how bystanders can help people being impacted by harassment, and vice versa, how people being impacted can ask for help. And so here was another different artist that we worked with to create this campaign around, and these were car cards that we used about how to ask somebody for help, how to find the train number so you can report it, how to be in contact with the train operator, or use the BART Watch app. So bringing these tools to light. And then the poster, you know, riding in the first car, knowing the train number, all those sorts of things that we really wanted to bring attention to. So we did a survey, and this is just some, again, pulling the data, seeing what people are seeing and what they're hearing. What they recall, when do they feel safe on BART, demographics, things like that. And posters, the interesting outcome of this is that the posters increased awareness among male, non-white, younger, and lower income riders, which was, and then who was more likely to feel this harassment. So this was really, again, further information to support our work here. And then the youth created these bystander intervention cards, which we're now piloting throughout the system, that we have available at our station agent booths and with our crisis intervention specialists and our transportation officers. And there's 2 cards. One's "You got me," and the other one's "I got you." And you can actually pass it to somebody. They're the side. They can fit in your wallet, and they actually allow people to contact each other quietly, or just to, and it also explains how to contact him.
I'm going to pop in.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. It sounds like somebody, if you are not speaking, please mute yourself. Thank you. Sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So, you know, I've done that too. And then a key one for us is our bystander intervention training. So in our first round, we actually created a bystander intervention training video. And it's been really interesting because it was actually around the same time when Portland had an unfortunate incident with a bystander, intervening bystander actually getting attacked and unfortunately died from the attack. And so really there are key ways that this can be effective and how to do it safely. And so we've had hundreds of people actually review this video, and it's something we continue to share within our staff and then exterior to really help broaden again that we can't over police. We can't put an officer on every train. We don't want to put an officer on every train. So what are the opportunities that we have to support a community that supports each other? And this is a sneak peek. This is our new Youth Informed Radical Visions of Safety. So this is our partner with Alliance for Girls that came out of phase 1 and phase 2. They did some further work. It's going to be released in December at the same time we release our metadata. And it again, youth-centered recommendations on how we can look at each phase of what we try and do in the future with that lens of youth concern and safety concerns and safety solutions. And I think this is many of you probably know about SEPTA, crime prevention through environmental design. And it's just really interesting to see what the youth, some of it is very, system focused, but a lot of it is things like space for creativity, playlists, places to hang out, things that you would think about more like street level engagement actually in our stations. And it's really not something that we've been seeing in US stations, but maybe is seen more in international stations. So just something that we're thinking about more is like, how do we create these atmospheres or places where people want to be and hang out to increase our sense of safety. Here are the key findings: physical, environmental safety, emotional, mental safety, and safety for others, and how those can kind of be implemented in our system. So the next steps for us will be to share these Mineta research survey data, and then leverage that data to bring this framework to the board and think about how we can bake it deeper into the organization and what our phase 3 will be. So BART is really a leader in this for California, along with LA, who we partner with often on this work, because we're really trying to bring this dialogue through on everything we do, and kind of help lead the state in really seeing young people and young women in the situation through both qualitative and quantitative data. So that's for now. I will turn it over. I will try to figure out how to stop screen sharing, and then I will turn it back over.
Jennifer, thank you so very much for that. I really appreciate it. It's really, rewarding hearing that connection between the art community, the youth who were involved, as well as the agency responses. So thank you so very much. And I'm sure we'll get to hear more when we come to the panel discussion. Our next group of presenters comes from a partnership between New Jersey Transit and Rutgers University. So we have Susan O'Donnell, who's a senior director at New Jersey Transit. She has extensive experience in business research and analysis. And previously, Susan held the position of senior project manager at VHB, as well as a senior associate vice president at Angwong Taub and Associates. Susan will be joined by Sam Rosenthal, who's a research project coordinator at the Allen M. Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University. Sam co-manages this research project that explored the experiences of women and sexual and gender minorities who use New Jersey Transit services. Unfortunately, Sam's colleague, Kate Heedy with Voorhees Transportation Center, was unable to make it and join today. So I will turn it over to our team from Rutgers and New Jersey Transit.
Susan, you're muted.
No, I think just an audio issue, Susan. My guess is it is probably picking up the wrong speaker if you have a microphone or other audio options. You want to know what we could do is take a quick stop, pause. We'll jump to the next group and then we'll come back. And maybe if you, Susan, hop off and come back on, because I know that you want to set the stage for this. So let's go with that, give you a chance to work on that audio AV. And so instead, we're going to jump ahead and go to a presentation from SEPTA. And actually, I had the pleasure of listening to SEPTA's lead executive director earlier this morning, Leslie Richards, who was our keynote speaker. So we have Melissa Dow and Deanna Jones, who are with Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. Melissa Dow is the manager of corporate strategy at SEPTA, and there she works closely with the chief of staff, CEO general manager, as well as the general manager team on enhancing operations and improving experiences for both riders and employees. And Missy is joined by Deanna Jones, who's the consumer research project manager at SEPTA. She has a particular interest in hard to reach populations and is passionate about making transit accessible, equitable, and safe for all, especially BIPOC and specifically women. Deanna is currently working on more data collection centered on how women travel and their safety. I'm a big data nerd, so I love hearing that. But let me turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Let me just share my screen. And get into the presentation. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deanna Jones. I'll be joined by my colleague, Missy Dow, momentarily, and we are going to give you a brief overview of SEPTA's research and initiatives around how women travel, specifically the impacts of gender and race on women's traveling decisions. So I'm going to jump into the focus groups that we conducted around bus revolution and reimagining regional rail. And then later, Missy will talk about our Women's Safety Committee and the system-wide safety survey that we recently conducted. So for almost 2 years of the planning team for Bus Revolution and Reimagining Regional Rail, they were conducting outreach, including a survey entitled a trade-off survey, to find out what our riders were willing to and weren't willing to do in terms of making traveling decisions. So during that course of time, differences across gender, race, and income started to come to the surface. We learned that these differences were among women, people of color, low-income people, and white high-income earning men across various issues. Some of those issues included how women, people of color, and low-income people specifically were less likely to prefer to walk longer to a faster, more frequent bus route, or how these groups were more likely to perceive SEPTA as difficult to access. And these groups also perceived regional rail, which is our commuter line, as a service that is reserved for white, high-income earning commuters. So with none of these things being true, we wanted to better understand the why behind some of these sentiments. So we engaged more deeply with our riders via focus groups. We made the decision to hear specifically from women of color across all groups. This was to guarantee that there was a level of commonality and safety, specifically psychological safety, for these women to talk about their issues and experiences. This would guide us closer to finding out the answers that we wanted while retaining a focus on gender and race. And to add some context, Black women make up roughly a third of our ridership. And SEPTA as a whole, but specifically our consumer research group, has been making concerted efforts to better engage with our Spanish-speaking riders. So those two groups were at the forefront of our mind. So a little bit about the methodology and recruitment. The project was structured around 5 focus groups containing 6 to 8 women who qualified based on a list of criteria that I'll get into momentarily. Participants were recruited through an online screening form sent to email addresses from one of 3 sources. One, SEPTA has a contact database that is full of contact information from people who previously participated in SEPTA surveys. 2, there was a partner database of our third-party research consultant. And last, we partnered with a community-based organization that serves the Latinx community in Philadelphia, and they really helped us garner Spanish-speaking participants. So in total, there were 5 focus groups, 3 in person and 2 were conducted virtually. In terms of the pre-screener filtered respondents on the following criteria. 1, all participants had to be women. And then we looked for age, geography, ethnicity, household income, language spoken at home for the Spanish-speaking group, and bus and rail usage. We painstakingly reviewed and revised and reviewed the moderator guide with help from our Chief Culture and Social Impact Officer to make sure that there was a level of cultural competency threaded throughout the guide, regardless of who the moderator was. But to that point, we also made sure that the moderator was a woman of color for all of the groups. And now getting into some of the feedback, the things we uncovered, and some takeaways. So in terms of communication, all of the groups of women, with the exception of the Spanish-speaking group, felt that SEPTA didn't do enough to engage them. They suggested SEPTA focusing communications in the forms of radio ads or TV ad campaigns or different, more noticeable media outlets. Women also were adamant about being less interested in communications about giveaways and sales and promotions, and wanted the communication to be focused on service and delay information. When it comes to safety, it remains a hot button topic and issue for SEPTA as well as our riders. So women shared that they felt unsafe at bus stops that were located in remote or desolate areas, especially when they were waiting for routes that were unreliable or infrequent. Furthermore, we have something called ghost buses, and I know we're not an anomaly, but these are buses that will show up on our SEPTA app, and it'll say it's about 10, 15 minutes away. The bus will disappear, and then our riders are stuck waiting sometimes 30 minutes to an hour longer than they anticipated. So these ghost buses put women who are already feeling uncomfortable and unsafe in situations where they have to feel unsafe for much longer than they anticipated. Bus service still is championed as a convenient, affordable option. However, with the recent issues such as operator shortages, infrequent routes, absent buses, bus service is a point of frustration, especially for the women in these groups. So they were adamant about getting SEPTA to focus on providing real-time information as well as transparency around what these issues are and how they are going to impact service in the future. So the big ticket item was bus revolution. At the time, we were calling it bus revolution. We've called it the bus network redesign. It's now called the new bus network. But any iteration of the name, it was a very polarizing discussion piece for the groups of women. Most women didn't know what bus revolution was. And if they did know, they had pretty skewed understanding or like kind of secondhand understanding of the project. So women in these groups had the idea that bus revolution was focused on taking away service versus improving bus service. And they equated bus revolution with the removal of bus stops or bus stop consolidation, and were adamant about the fact that they were not willing to walk to a farther bus stop, even if that meant getting to a more frequent bus route. That last piece was something that they didn't know at the time, or a piece of the communication that they missed. All they heard was that they were going to have to bypass their regular bus stop and walk to one that was farther away. Once we were able to give them more details about the project and explain to them in detail about what Bus Revolution was and why we were consolidating some of the bus stops, that they were going to be getting a more frequent, more reliable bus if they were to walk to a farther bus stop, all of the women were then willing to walk 2 to 4 West Philadelphia blocks to a more frequent bus. And I don't know who is familiar with West Philadelphia, but West Philadelphia blocks are long. So that says a lot for the lengths that the women were willing to go to get to a more frequent, more reliable bus. We also talked about fares, ticketing, and strollers. Women described scenarios where they are running errands using the bus or trip chaining, and they ran into challenges preventing them from finishing their errands because the transfers didn't line up properly, or their SEPTA key card timed out. So you can only tap a certain amount of times in the span of a couple of hours. So the women suggested having time tickets in order to resolve these issues. Women were also confused about what the stroller policy was for SEPTA buses. At the time, we didn't have like a clear-cut stroller policy. However, since this focus group, we do have an official open stroller policy, and we have a designated page on the website dedicated to traveling with children and traveling with families. Overall, the biggest takeaway was that the planning team and the Bus Revolution team was able to hold additional rounds of community outreach. They were equipped with this new information that they had from the focus groups, and they held the meetings with the community, and they were focused on the issues that a lot of these women raised, which matched what the community issues were as well. They really let the community frame the conversation, but now that they had this information from the focus groups, they were able to reframe the messaging to respond to the needs of the community. As always, it's important to invest in qualitative research. Quantitative data is very important, but I think we get a more nuanced understanding of customer needs when we have the qualitative data to match with it. We saw that we have to get creative with recruiting our Spanish-speaking riders. The traditional methods of recruitment proved not to be successful for our Spanish-speaking riders, so we have to get a little creative with that. And as Missy is going to talk about shortly, our Women's Safety Strategy Committee, we've done a lot of work, and we have a lot of upcoming initiatives that we're excited about that tie all of this together.
Great. Thanks so much, Deanna. Just to tie in to what Deanna talked about, we also wanted to spend just a few brief minutes on what has happened in building on that work that they did around those focus groups for our 2 initiatives. We have a committee at SEPTA that's about maybe a year old. It is the Women's Safety Committee. It is formed by our executive leadership to address women's safety issues on our system. It truly was inspired by the work. I'm so excited to be following folks at BART, because we really were inspired by their work and the work at LA Metro in thinking about how women travel, thinking about how we can make them more safe and how we can service them. We have representatives from across our organization in different divisions everywhere. Deanna's a part of the committee. I'm a part of the committee. We have transit police, planning, every part of our organization, and we meet monthly and really get that perspective on putting a female lens on the decisions that are being made around travel and making sure we're considering those items. What some of those things it initially led to, some low-hanging fruit, if you will, is as BART did, we updated our code of conduct to address harassment. We discovered through analysis that we did not address harassment specifically in our code of conduct, and we now do. We have an app as well for reporting incidents, our Transit Watch app, and sexual harassment was not a category. So we worked with our transit police, we worked with the vendor in bringing that to their attention, and it is now a category that can be reported within that app. And finally, we're working our operator incident reporting. If they have an incident happen on the job, there was also no category for sexual harassment there. We wanted to be sensitive to our operators that are experiencing this. And if we wanted to look through that data, we had to look through the anecdotal notes in just like a harassment category and an assault category, or an inappropriate behavior category. And we now are working towards having that as a category as well. Thanks, Deanna. So what that led to, as we were doing this work together and we discovered these items, our next logical step was to conduct a safety survey. We had not done a system-wide survey on safety in quite some time. So the goal of this was to get feedback on their perceptions and experiences of gender-based and sexual harassment and we actually ended up involving other criminal activity while we were doing the survey to collect that data as well while folks are traveling on SEPTA. We are analyzing it currently through the lens of gender-based and sexual harassment and violence, but we obviously can't do that if we don't have all of the data to compare it to and getting that male perspective as well. So it went out to all writers. Ways we distributed it: email to previous survey participants, PGA contacts, and our iSEPTA Philly, which is our social media account. Placement on the Transit Watch, on the Transit app that folks can go through there. And we, on our SEPTA website, on our partners on social media. Deanna was huge in this. We had partners. We wanted to ensure that we had an LGBTQ plus lens on this, that we had a Spanish speaking availability on it. So we worked with several partners, the Mazzoni Center, which is our LGBTQ center in Philadelphia, Transit Forward Philadelphia, government officials, really had a strong push to get our writers' impressions here. We are thrilled to let you know that we had over 10,000 writers participate in the survey. It is our highest count for a survey ever. Folks obviously feel super passionate about this topic and want their opinions known on it. So it was available in English, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. And we did end up, as we're working through the data, we are, to make sure that it's representative of our overall population, we are weighting that data by demographic. Also want to point out at this, parallel effort, and it was just great timing. We had an intern from Temple University. She is a gender studies major, and she was very passionate about this. She actually approached our CEO, Leslie, if you were watching earlier, her speak about experience she had on our system. And through that conversation with Leslie, she ended up interning for us, and she concurrently conducted a survey with Temple students. And she held a survey. She did one-on-one interviews to get their perceptions on safety on our system as well, and then presented that to our team and our Women's Safety Committee. And what you'll see is what our students saw lined up with what our overall population saw. We are still analyzing this, so we don't have a full analysis to present to you today. Hopefully next year we'll have that full analysis and we'll have moved forward enough. But we did want to share a bit. We're analyzing. Deanna will be conducting focus groups and interviews based on this, because again, while this the data is great, we want to make sure we're looking into those themes, and she can dig into it and create focus groups to really get input from our writers in those areas. So some of the themes around what we did want to share was what would make them feel safer. And it very much aligns with what your BART found and what they want more police at stops, stations, and on board, better lighting, CCTs on stations, which we do have, where we're learning we need to make people aware of that, more frequent service, transit ambassadors, next to arrive info at stations, security hotlines, text to report, anti-harassment signage. So just a sampling of the things folks feel would make them feel safer while they're on our system. And we are working on many of these, and we are going to continue to work on many of these. If we go ahead and move forward, Gianna. Our next steps for this, again, we're in the analysis phase. So we're going to complete that data analysis, conduct the focus groups. Our plan then is to bring this to our leadership and workshop this data and have some decision making behind this. We're hoping to look at campaigns, potential initiatives, looking at lighting in our stations, looking at that looking at ambassadors. We don't know where it's going to lead yet, but we're really excited about the possibilities. My personal hope is that we can have a powerful campaign such as BART has had around sexual harassment and awareness on our system to help folks know how to feel safer, that others do have their back. So that's wanted to talk a little bit about that. We don't have a lot of results from it yet, but again, we are collecting, we're looking, and in the next year, really hoping to put some initiatives together to address the issue.
So thank you both so very much. I thought that was a great presentation. I love the detail on the robust data collection effort, both that quantitative as well as qualitative. And I think it's a really great example of how agencies are learning from one another. You mentioned the LA Metro work, which we had featured last year in the 2023 symposium, the BART work. So I think this really is kind of a community effort. So thank you so very much for that. Let's jump back and see if we fixed our audio issues with our
Can you hear me? Yay!
Wonderful. Yay.
Sorry about that.
All right. So no, it happens all the time. So let's go back to our New Jersey Transit Rutgers folks, and I will turn it back over to you, Susan. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks so much. And it's been great so far. So hopefully we'll add to that. As Hillary mentioned, I'm Susan O'Donnell. I'm the Senior Director for Business Analysis and Research here at New Jersey Transit. And we're here to talk about our ongoing project about marginalized genders and how they use transit. The project, as we've heard earlier, was inspired by LA Metro's work and on women and girls and the Transport for London project. And the only slight difference with our project was when I was seeking funding for this, we had just started our company employee resource groups. And we had started one called Empower for Women and another one called Ride with Pride for our LGBTQ community. And I thought, gee, it would be interesting to look at all those groups and see maybe some of the issues are similar, maybe some of the issues are different, but that maybe we look at both women, all women, girls, and LGBTQ as part of this project. The project was funded through Federal Highway, through the New Jersey DOT Bureau of Research, and Rutgers is conducting the research. Just a little bit about New Jersey Transit in case you're not familiar. We are the nation's third largest provider of bus, rail, and light rail transit, linking major points in New Jersey, New York, and Philadelphia. We cover a service area of over 5,000 square miles, and we have about 12,000 employees. On the map in orange, you see over 250 bus routes. In blue are 12 rail lines, and somewhere buried in there in magenta, those are our three colors, you'll see 3 light rail lines, and we have Access Link, our paratransit system. So it's a really complex system. It's spread across a large service area, serving customers from urban, suburban, and rural areas of the state. Next slide. In the next few slides, I'm going to provide an overview of the project and talk about key aspects, followed by Sam. And unfortunately, Kate's not with us, but Sam's going to do her part. We'll share some of the draft findings from the data collection and analysis. This slide outlines the scope of work, which is pretty typical for a research study like this. It includes literature review and a practice scan, some secondary data analysis, some new data collection, including a customer survey and customer focus groups. And then one of the big parts that I thought was a great aspect of this, and I'm going to talk more about, is engaging a stakeholder group of agency employees throughout the project. I thought that was a really critical aspect. And then, of course, the final report. I didn't want this project to be one of those projects that gets done and then it just sits on a shelf and nothing really happens. As Hillary mentioned, prior to coming to New Jersey Transit, much of my career was spent in consulting. And there was a number of projects where everyone was really passionate. It was a small group from the consulting and from the agency. And you know, we all at the end felt like we had really great ideas. And then nothing happened. Or people pushed back when it got sort of up the chain. People were like, oh, you can't do this because of this or because of that. So for those reasons, I really wanted to get key people in the agency involved at the beginning and give them a full understanding of what we've learned and why we've come to these conclusions, and get them part of the recommendations and get them helping us figure out what we can and what we can't do, or how we can do some things that might be challenging. So we wanted them to know why we were doing this project and what we had learned from all of the research that had been conducted. And that way they were actively involved and could relate the findings to their agency workflows and, like I said, help us identify recommendations. The stakeholder group included over 40 people from all parts of the agency, including operations, communications, police, capital programs, civil rights, finance, safety, talent management, training, planning, compliance, HR, and more. And on this last slide, the next slide, this is sort of a focus of the stakeholder meetings that we had. We had 4. The first 2 were virtual 1-hour meetings where we talked about the background of the project, why we were doing it, and then discussed a lot of the findings that you're going to hear later in this presentation. In the third meeting, which is what this slide really highlights, was we had a 2.5-hour in-person meeting, and we called it an ideation workshop. We had breakout groups to get the stakeholder feedback on the research and how it fits with their work. And then we started discussing their ideas from what they heard for recommendations and what was needed to get them implemented. At the first virtual meeting, we reviewed everything that was discussed to get any at the final virtual meeting, we reviewed everything that was discussed at all 3 meetings, and to get any clarification or input on what we've heard and what we were sharing. All in all, I think we had some really great discussions. People who participated were really enthusiastic about having the opportunity to present and sharing their ideas, and really appreciated being part of the project. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
All right, thanks, Susan. So I'm Sam Rosenthal. I work at the Voorhees Transportation Center, which is a research center that's part of Rutgers University. I am going to be covering some of the key findings from this research effort. So the first part here deals with our literature review and survey. So the first part of the research effort, literature review, data analysis, and survey. The lit review looked at scholarly articles and gray literature that also included interviews with peer agencies that were engaged in similar gender-based work. We also analyzed secondary data sources, which included National Household Travel Survey data, American Community Survey PUMS data, as well as previously conducted New Jersey Transit customer satisfaction surveys. And in addition to all this research, we also created an original online survey for this study, which was conducted from June through November of 2023. The survey involved a convenience sample with recruitment via email, and the resulting survey got 7,700 responses. So from these data sources, we identified some overarching themes related to women's travel and the travel of LGBTQ folks. And in some parts of this presentation, we use LGBTQ, that term, interchangeably with sexual and gender minorities, which is sometimes abbreviated here as SGMs. Overall, among our findings, women travel more days per week for all trip purposes than men. We also found that women take more varied trips and make more stops along their journey than men do. Women's travel also often takes place during off-peak hours, due in part to higher caregiving responsibilities. At the same time, off-peak hours often have lower transit frequency, which can expose women to long wait times, security threats, and physical tiring. Women are also more likely to travel with children and packages, and are therefore more likely to be concerned about stroller storage than men. And based on national travel data, both men and women in same-sex relationships make more trips and longer trips via transit than their counterparts in opposite-sex relationships. And in New Jersey specifically, women and sexual and gender minorities use New Jersey transit services more frequently for non-work trips than cisgender straight men do. We also found that women and sexual and gender minorities consistently express more concern about the condition and comfort of New Jersey transit than men. So while everyone we surveyed was concerned to some degree about other riders being discourteous, women and sexual and gender minorities expressed more concern. Women and sexual and gender minorities also noted personal safety concerns while using NJ Transit, especially at night. And women and sexual and gender minorities were also more likely to report that New Jersey Transit employee presence made them feel safer than police presence. The proportion of survey respondents that reported experiences of harassment or assault while using New Jersey Transit were 9% among men, 13% among women, and 18% among sexual and gender minorities. And notably, more than 80% of these incidents went unreported. The majority of those reporting experiencing harassment or assault while using New Jersey Transit said that they feared being injured or harmed. And the impacts associated with these incidents were often more acutely felt by women and LGBTQ folks. And women and sexual and gender minorities were also far more likely to attribute the harassment or assault that they experienced to their gender identity or expression. And all of this together means that women and sexual and gender minorities experience extra burdens associated with mobility and travel, including psychological burdens like stress or fear, as well as financial burdens associated with shifting modes. Women and sexual and gender minorities often must do things to avoid harassment or feelings of unsafety while using transit. And this can include things like more careful trip planning, switching modes, traveling at different hours, behaving differently, or hiding identity characteristics. The second part of the research, in addition to the literature review and survey, was focus groups. So we conducted 6 focus groups in New Jersey, 2 with cisgender women, 2 with cisgender lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, and 2 with gender minorities, including transgender and gender nonconforming folks. For each pair of focus groups, we held 1 in person and 1 virtually. And then among the 3 in-person focus groups, we spread them out geographically across the state. So we held 1 in North Jersey, 1 in Central Jersey, and 1 in South Jersey. So this was to make these groups focus groups as accessible as possible to people, and also collect information on a wider range of transit experiences because different types of services throughout different parts of the state. Focus group participants were recruited via email. We received about 1,200 volunteers. Ultimately, we invited 90 people, and 68 people agreed to participate across all 6 focus groups, and each person who participated was provided with a stipend. We created a discussion guide for each focus group that addressed the following topics: overall satisfaction with New Jersey Transit, accessibility and physical design, reliability and communications, comfort and condition, safety and security, and improvements to customer experience. So over the next few slides, I'm going to just touch on each of these in a little bit more detail. And a lot of what we heard echoes information that we found in the lit review and survey. So for these slides, I'm primarily going to be focusing on findings that were different. So when it comes to overall satisfaction with New Jersey Transit service, findings were generally similar across all groups. People liked the reliability and convenience of transit service. People like senior discounts, the variety of service options that helps increase mobility, as many of the participants in focus groups did not drive or own a car. A lot of people felt that using New Jersey Transit was better than driving, saving time and emotional costs. One participant in the transgender focus group noted that they feel that building relationships with New Jersey Transit employees is beneficial. Some of the reasons that participants were not satisfied, again, generally similar across all groups. Main sources of dissatisfaction were lack of communication when it comes to service disruptions, the timing of services, especially at night, early in the morning, and on weekends, and feelings of safety at bus stop locations. So that includes heavy traffic near bus stops, lack of lighting, things like that. Specific reasons within each focus group. So for the cisgender women focus group, some of the concerns were not enough spaces on buses, not enough space on buses, and overcrowding and the behavior of other passengers. Concerns in the cisgender LGB focus group included unpleasant experiences with New Jersey Transit employees and police. And then in the transgender focus group, several participants reported experiences of transphobia while using transit. When it comes to accessibility and physical design, this is talking specifically about the physical design of New Jersey Transit vehicles, stations, and stops. Focus group participants reported dangerous traffic conditions near bus stops, as I mentioned, too few and restrooms in poor condition, difficulty navigating stations for people with disabilities, disparity of conditions between different stations and stops on the system, difficulty traveling with bags, luggage, or children, and again, too little space on vehicles, especially when they are crowded. For reliability, information, and communications, more than half of all participants agreed that services are overall reliable, but that communication is poor during service disruptions. Other communications concerns included lack of train frequency, service delays during cancellations, buses passing up stops because they're full, inconsistent timing of buses, and in some cases, unfriendly bus operators or conductors. For comfort and condition, participants noted that the condition of stations and stops varies widely by location. Most agreed that overall stations and vehicles were generally clean, but some older vehicles can be in poor condition, and some vehicles participants felt were not cleaned thoroughly or properly. The most significant concerns on this topic related to signage, restrooms in poor condition or unopened, and facilities in general being closed at night. And a number of focus group participants also noted the lack of gender-neutral restrooms throughout the system. For safety and security, traveling at night is a concern for many, especially due to poor lighting and closed facilities. Most focus group participants wanted to see increased employee presence, and there were mixed opinions when it came to increased police presence. So cisgender women were generally more open to police, though not everyone agreed, while transgender folks generally did not support increased police presence. And then when it came to security cameras, most were unaware that they even existed, and many felt that that security cameras are not a deterrent. They really only help after an incident has already occurred. For customer experience, some of the suggestions for physical improvements are kind of reiterate a lot of what we've been hearing already today: more and better lighting, higher levels of amenities at bus stops, ADA accessibility improvements, the installation of gender-neutral and family restrooms, and more signage and better communication, again, especially during service disruptions. That's something that came up again and again throughout the focus groups. Some other suggested improvements include greater presence of New Jersey Transit employees, not police, circulating through facilities, especially at night. Participants suggested additional training for New Jersey Transit personnel, especially sensitivity training related to the needs of women and sexual and gender minorities. Along with this, actively recruiting more women and LGBTQ+ employees at New Jersey Transit. And some also suggested signs or pins with pride colors to show visible support of LGBTQ customers. And I'm just going to close with this quote from one of our LGBTQ focus group participants. They said, "This is the first time that I thought that New Jersey Transit, cared about me having this study." So I think, someone mentioned earlier that qualitative research is really important, and I think this supports that idea. Not only is it important for transit agency trying to get information about its ridership and improve things, but from the perspective of transit riders, I think it shows that the agency is thinking about them and really taking into account their concerns as they try to improve service. So here's Susan's and my contact info, as well as the contact info for my colleague Kate, who again couldn't be here today, but contributed a lot to this project. So thanks.
Susan, Sam, thank you so very much for that. I really enjoyed the presentation and the work that's going on and the partnership between New Jersey Transit as well as Rutgers. So it really shows how you can leverage the expertise and skill sets across both academia as well as the agency. I love the idea of an ideation workshop and really expanding to include sexual and gender minorities and kind of looking at some of those intersexual qualities. It was great. Certainly the quote on your second to last slide was very, very powerful. So thank you both for that work. So I'm going to switch to our fourth presentation, and this is our last presentation for this session, and then we'll all come together for a panel discussion. So for those of you who don't know, there is a transit cooperative research program study underway right now that's being led by Fair and Peers. And we have Chelsea Ritter with us today from Fair and Peers, who is heavily involved with this project. She is a principal at Fair and Peers, where she leads their climate change and resilience group, works on a variety of projects that encourage people to diversify their travel patterns towards the use of low carbon modes, first last mile planning, transit customer experience, so super valuable for this particular study, multimodal safety, VMT policy, as well as active transportation conceptual design. You kind of do it all, Chelsea. It's awesome. This project, I think, is really important for the industry because it is really looking at developing this practical guide to be used and implemented, toolkit ideas. So it's a project I've been following for quite some time now. So I'm excited to have the update on it, Chelsea. Turning it over to you.
Great, thanks. Give me one moment to get my presentation set up correctly. I think I can figure out how to share my whole screen and then turn things into presentation view. Hopefully this will work. Just 1 second. Okay, can you see my whole presentation screen? I can't see video anymore on my end, so if someone could verbally confirm.
Looks good.
Perfect.
Looks
Thank
good,
you so
Chelsea.
much. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Hillary, for having us here, for having me here today. As you said, I'm Chelsea Ritter at Fair and Peers. I work in our Los Angeles office, but I've been working on this national project through TCRP and the TRB for almost a year now with Nicole Waldheim, who is a principal investigator, and Mary Rose Fissinger, who's a project manager. They were unable to be here today, so you just get me, but hopefully I can do the project justice and help share some of the early findings from our first phase of research and where we're heading from here. So I'm going to go through an overview of the project today. It is TCRP B53, if anyone wants to look it up and see what the original research need was as defined by the TRB committee. I'm going to then also go through the phase 1 key findings. We did a pretty substantial research effort nationwide, speaking with many of the folks that we have already heard from today and more. And then go through phase 2 of our project, which we'll be moving into in the next year, developing a toolkit full of tools that will be easy for agencies to hopefully pick up and deploy to improve the gender responsive planning that they're able to do in their agency. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end, or we'll pass it back to Hillary to do a Q&A for the whole panel. Okay, so the project overview really started with this research need. The ability to reach destinations and interact in our communities using public transportation should be equal for women. That really underpins everything we're doing on this project and really everything that we've heard today so far. And as we've seen, not only from the LA County Metro work that's been done, which I had the privilege of working on both of those efforts with Metro, but from many of the other agencies, what we have found is that time and time again, when research is done into this space, women's mobility needs, concerns, and preferences simply are not being accounted for or being met. And so there's a couple of critical focus areas that have continued to surface over and over again, safety being the top one. We know we've heard that through all of the presentations today, but also things like fares and the cost burden of traveling as a woman on the system, stop, station, and vehicle design, service frequency and reliability, that ghost bus issue that was described earlier, really contributing not only to the frustration with the reliability of the system, but also those safety concerns. And then lastly, post-pandemic considerations, as we know that a lot of women during the pandemic moved to work from home. And so their travel patterns maybe changed more substantially than some of the general population trends. So we wanted to do some research into that space as well to understand if there's a difference in how women are traveling today in 2024 versus 2019 when some of this initial research for LA Metro was completed. Our project team is made up of some amazing practitioners and researchers. You have, as Hillary mentioned, led by Farron Peers. We managed the Understanding How Women Travel study 5 years ago now for LA Metro. And we have similar work underway for SFMTA and LADOT. STV is also on our team. They managed the LA Metro Gender Action Plan, which was the implementation-focused follow-up effort to the Understanding How Women Travel study. They're really on board to lead interviews and workshops with the transit agencies and then figure out how to connect everything to the implementation side of the house. We have the UCLA research team who's leading literature reviews for our work. They also led literature reviews for the LA Metro work, as well as LADOT and SFMTA work. And they bring that academic expertise that's really important to this process to make sure our research methods are sound. And lastly, we have Zan Associates. They specialize in community engagement and focus groups. And so they're supporting some work in the Twin Cities area on a daily life study, transportation needs in daily life. And that really ties in very nicely to the work here, as so much of the transportation needs to serve your daily life are different for women than for men and other genders, which is really underpinned by all the research that's been done and shared so far today. So together, the four teams are working on implementing this 2-year-long project. We kicked off at the end of 2023. We started with a refresh on the literature review, and then we moved into our primary data collection and analysis phase of work. I'll talk through exactly what that included in a few minutes. We just this summer, late summer, had our interim panel meeting, which is a really big milestone where we kind of complete phase 1, present all of the data findings back to the panel, which guides our work, and produce an interim report to kind of document that conclusion of phase 1 and move us into phase 2, which is all of the development of tools and resources. At the beginning of 2025, we are anticipating having draft tools available, which we will then workshop through our panel and also through follow-up focus group meetings with all of the people who we engaged in that primary data collection phase of work, which again, I'll get into in more detail. And we have a chance to regroup with those focus group members to see if the tools that we've developed are meeting the needs and are easy enough to pick up and run with, regardless of context, right? This work is meant to really be relevant nationwide. And we've heard a lot from the agencies today that are on the leading edge of this space. There are a lot of agencies out there that are really have a couple of staff that may be really excited about doing this work or recognize a need, but just don't know where to get started. And so this set of tools and resources is really intended to be for those transit agencies that don't have local champions or don't have executive office support yet for this kind of work and don't have maybe as many resources or bandwidth available for investigating this area. And then the second half of 2025 will really focus on finalizing all of the deliverables, completing our last panel meeting, and importantly, hosting a webinar where we hope that everyone who's here today will be able to attend, learn more about our resources and tools, and be able to sort of socialize all of these things out into the world of transit agencies. Okay, so I'm going to talk through phase 1 of our data collection and analysis process. As I mentioned, we started with that literature review, which really refreshed, in the last 5 years, what has been done in the space. There's lots more agency activity in this space than there was in 2019. We've heard from lots of them today, and that's such an exciting development. So there are many more resources available, and especially in the gray literature space, which is that agency and governmental space. We completed a nationwide transit agency survey. I'll talk a little bit more about our response rate on that and some of the key findings there. We also completed a set of agency staff interviews, follow-up interviews with people who self-selected in that nationwide agency survey to say, yes, I'd love to talk to someone on the research team a little bit more deeply about what we're doing, what we're encountering in terms of barriers or areas where we're really able to make some good progress. We also talked to a set of community-based organizations because those folks are really on the ground, maybe most directly hearing those needs about the riders that are using all of those systems that we surveyed and then interviewed, followed up with. Lastly, we also looked at a national organization interview to gain some perspective on just sort of the big picture of politics and funding and where the industry is headed in terms of the transit agency space. So those three interview groups really constituted some qualitative information gathering, agencies, CBOs, and that national organization perspective. And then we concluded with a review of agency data sets. And so this was something we also asked in the survey for agencies to self-select and offer up some of their raw survey data so that we could do a sort of ground truthing of what kind of questions were being asked in some of these surveys, how gender disaggregation was happening in some of the places that are collecting gender disaggregatable information, and whether there were similar findings from a safety perspective, from a fare perspective, from an experience perspective, to be able to understand if there's some rural or small agency nuance that we need to work into our tools and resources while we develop those that can better resonate for agencies of different sizes or contexts. So really looking to make sure that, the findings that we heard about today, the findings that we know were well documented in the Metro study are really relevant and the same kinds of trends that we're seeing nationwide, regardless of context. So for our agency survey, we reached 75 staff members at agencies across 47 agencies representing 20 plus states. This achieved our response rate goal, which we had set out at the beginning before we started doing the survey. We wanted to make sure that we reached one rural serving agency in at least 5 FTA regions for a minimum of 5 responses from rural agencies, 5 different responses from 5 different agencies in different regions. And then at least 2 responses in each of the FTA regions. And this was really to make sure that we were getting a representative survey response from across the country and across those important contextual differences between rural agencies and more urbanized agencies. The topics that we covered on the agency survey included personal safety and security, fare policy, bus stop design, station design, vehicle design and procurement, service planning, community engagement, marketing, and communications were all sort of lumped in together. And the way that the survey was set up allowed someone to answer a set of generalized questions at the beginning of the survey, and then answer whether they do work in any of these topic areas. So a person who was answering and they were coming to the space from a communications perspective wasn't necessarily asked to answer a bunch of questions about service planning or vehicle design. And so we wanted to make it sort of as streamlined as possible for people taking the time to answer this survey. So that's why you see you have a different number of agencies that responded to each of these topic areas on the right-hand side. For the agency surveys or the agency interviews that we did, we interviewed the agencies on the left-hand sidebar, Gainesville Regional Transit, SEPTA. We spoke with Metro Transit in Minneapolis, LA Metro in LA, Johnson County Transit in Kansas, WMATA in Washington, D.C. also goes by Metro, confusingly, and NCTD in San Diego. So really across the country, and we felt like it really got a good blend of different contexts there with a couple of more rural agencies and a number of more urban ones that we know are also doing more work in this space. Over the 3 sessions, we asked about how they're addressing gender inequity or gender equity in transit. And we asked questions through a kind of interview guide. So all of the questions that we started with were somewhat standardized, but of course the conversations went in the directions that they went, talking through challenges in implementation, general transit planning. And then we made sure to ask what kinds of resources that they felt would be the most helpful to move the ball forward in their agency, wherever they were on the continuum of like really aggressively involved in gender responsive planning to we're really interested but haven't gotten started yet. And then the 5 additional organizations that we went through interviews with, the first 4 are community-based organizations, and then that last one on the list is the national organization. The House of Mercy is a comprehensive residential provider in Iowa, providing behavioral health services for Women and Children. Alliance for Girls is the alliance of girl-serving organizations and leaders advancing gender equity with a focus of girls and gender-expansive youth. We already heard from Bart today about the amazing work that they've done in partnership. Move Minnesota, which includes transit advocates, grassroots organizers, coalition builders, and policy experts, really specifically working to move the needle on just and sustainable transportation. And then MUSA, which is Mujeres Unidas Sirviendo Activamente in Los Angeles. They are a nonprofit with an aim to encourage women to seek personal development for themselves and their families. So you can see here it's a blend of either agencies or organizations that directly serve women, either in an advocacy or an activist space, in one case in an actual residential service provider space, or a transit activist advocate organization that really is working on transit specific ideas and working on incorporating gender responsive planning into those kinds of activist or advocacy points. And then lastly, we talked to Transportation for America, which is the transportation arm of Smart Growth America. They shape federal policy that supports safe, affordable, and convenient transportation systems, connecting people to opportunities. The rider data review that we did, that was that last final piece of primary data collection and analysis. We looked at data from BART, from Lynx, from Metro Transit in the Twin Cities, and from Go Triangle, North Carolina, which is a regional effort that includes 8 different agencies. So we looked at onboard rider survey for 3 of these 4 categories. And then we looked on, for BART, we looked at the online survey for Not One More Girl. We looked at the effectiveness, the awareness and the effectiveness of campaign and gender-based violence experiences. That was the kind of data that we were able to look at for the BART data set. And then for Lynx, Metro Transit, and Go Triangle, it was a combination of questions that were being asked around trip frequency, trip characteristics, fare payment, safety and security, origin and destination, and customer satisfaction. So more of the sort of traditional set of rider experience surveys, whereas the BART one was really much more focused on gender-based violence. Okay, so really quickly, some key findings, major themes that emerged from sort of the collection and digestion of all of these data inputs. Some big differences do exist across the country, and this is primarily around resourcing. Only a few agencies, really large, relatively urban agencies, are working actively in this space, many of whom we heard from today. And the agencies that are leading the way really operate in a different context with different resources and constraints than most of the other transit agencies in the country that we heard from. So that's where we found the really main difference is not about the experience that women are having on systems or some of the challenges, but that it's this resourcing of this issue area. We also found really important similarities in that even among those largest transit agencies, resource constraints are still a major barrier for transit agencies. And really prevent sort of institutionalization and uptake of gender responsive planning ideas in every space that they could be showing up in. And then again, many of the challenges that women face are similar across the country, across agencies, regardless of urban or rural context. That safety, fare, bus stop and station area design, vehicle design, and reliability of the service. So we found that in the data collection and analysis space, gender disaggregated data is inconsistently collected. Lack of staffing and resources is that primary hurdle. Community engagement is widely used, but not typically designed to ensure women's participation. And rider surveying is conducted by nearly all agencies. It's a federal requirement in most cases, but often is not or cannot be disaggregated by gender based on how it's being collected. And surveys are trending towards a more digital format, which increases the opportunity to streamline some of the data collection. Some of the key findings in planning and evaluation is that there's a pretty limited use of key performance indicators kind of across the board, whether or not they relate to gender responsive planning. Gender is more commonly considered in the planning process, but not often considered in the evaluation process to understand if there's a difference in how a particular program or policy is serving women or other genders on the system. And urban agencies are more likely to consider gender in their planning practices and evaluation methods than more rural agencies. We've seen some progress in implementing initiatives that have outsized benefit for women, but they're not often planned and implemented or intentionally designed that way. So a lot of the types of implementation programs happen to have a good benefit for women riders, but really, again, are not being evaluated in that way or even planned in that way necessarily. And agency structure internally, agency priorities, and jurisdictional ambiguity are all obstacles to the successful implementation of these kinds of policies and programs. And lastly, successful policies and programs implemented in conjunction with community organizations really are most effective when they're built on a foundation of trust. I think the best example of this is BART's partnership with the Alliance for Girls. And then we did hear a little bit about the accessibility challenges that women and families face, and just lack of ability to get to where they need to go through using the transit system. And so that really speaks back to that service planning and policy setting for that space. And then the big one, personal safety and security. Almost all agencies expressed that this is the #1 priority for women riders. The design and condition of stops really influence women's perceptions of personal safety. And the means of reporting crimes or harassment vary widely by agency. Improved reporting and data collection methods are really needed across the board to address these issues. And then we also saw, similar to what was shared today, their staff and riders typically express support for increased staff presence on the system to increase personal safety, with a mix of findings about how police fit into the mix of what that staff presence looks like. Okay, I know I'm right at the end here, so I'm going to blitz through the toolkit development. The takeaways from phase 1 are really helping to inform how we're going about the development of tools and resources. Most importantly, the practices from large urban agencies really do need to be right sized for agencies of different sizes and different resourcing. And every resource, every tool that we develop should be organized around responsibilities that every agency has, regardless of size and regardless of specific org chart roles, which really vary a lot from agency to agency. So this really allows it to land in each agency sort of regardless of how they're set up or their size of staff. Different contexts must be acknowledged and tool nuance must be developed to make the implementation as successful as possible. And we heard loud and clear that we really need to prioritize low-hanging fruit that can be easily adopted without additional resource expenditure. So the focus areas are written here on the right: data collection and analysis, communication, community engagement, planning and implementation, which includes service planning, station design, stop design, vehicle procurement, and then policies and standards. We'll have some nice tool cover sheets, which include some executive summary kind of information about each tool, focus area, intended user. We heard the importance of making the business case for why gender responsive planning is even necessary for an agency. We'll have that nuance for the small and large agencies and the urban and rural agencies, and then some information about level of effort, where in the planning, implementation, evaluation process this particular tool can be deployed, and then what kind of tool it is. So some examples of ideas that have emerged so far are about gender audit of policies and infrastructures, including codes of conduct, other plans and policies, stop station vehicle, design and infrastructure choices, standard questions for collecting gender information in surveys, including best practices for asking about gender, and standard questions to obtain specific feedback related to gendered needs. Best service practices for women on public transit, including things related to vehicle design and service planning, and then communications campaigns, how they're built, how they're evaluated. And that would include community engagement as a key communication campaign that also dovetails with that data collection, qualitative data collection that's so important for agencies. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to escape out of screen sharing and presentation mode and turn it back to Hillary.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, Chelsea. You know, as you know, I've heard a little bit about this project as it's been going on, and it's just every time I hear more about it, I get more and more excited for the end of 2025 when we'll have all of the final work. But I really appreciate your mention of things like right-sizing tools for different types of agencies, and how those toolkits will help make that business case. So I really appreciate all the work that the team has put into this. So let's bring everybody back and we'll get into our panel discussion with the last 20 minutes or so we have left of this session. So, all right, great, thank you everyone. You know, one of the things that I noticed and I heard throughout all of the conversations is the importance of engaging with advocacy groups, other stakeholders, women riders, gender minorities. And I think all of you talked about that as part of that initial consultation phase, which I think is just tremendous. We know it's important, but I want to go even a little bit further. And I think maybe I'll direct my first kind of question initially to Jennifer with BART, but I hope all of you will hop in, because what I'm really interested in exploring deeper is how do we take that engagement work beyond that initial consultation into also ongoing and evaluation of the solutions. So how do we work with women and advocacy groups to ensure that the findings from the work that the research are accurately reflected in the solutions, as well as gathering ongoing feedback and evaluation? So I think I'll start with Bart and Jennifer.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not going to share the findings of our new report until December. And it is actually, that is what our new report coming out is, that it is really talking about how to look through that lens. I won't say though that we're not challenged, and I think this has been brought up by a few folks, is like, how do you bake this research into an agency? I mean, we're right now, it's like, where does this live? Right now it's in the communications department and the art department with some input from police and you know, some other groups in the agency. And I think that's that ongoing, and what we're seeing in the language that we're hearing is that those partnerships need to be ongoing and consistent. So focus groups, which we did, which others have done, are critical. And, you know, do you look at things like LA did, which has a council on women and girls, or do you know, what are the ways to do that? Because I think we'll have guidelines and recommendations on how to do that. And it's really keeping that dialogue open, I think, is what we're finding over and over again, to keep the pressure on, right? Because let's face it, our systems, I'll be honest, were designed in the 60s by mostly white male engineers. They weren't thinking about these things. And as transit is changing, especially post-COVID, who our writers are, when they're writing, you know, all this research y'all are doing, this is the stuff that's like, we are being tasked to look at who we're working with, who our writers are. And that's really that ongoing dialogue. And if we don't have it, and we're seeing our numbers drop or not rise, shame on us, because it's right in front of us, I think.
Thanks, Jennifer. I wonder if others have thoughts on that from their
I'll just
work.
jump in. I mean, we're in the beginning part of our project. So, you know, we're not to the end where we're talking about continuing relationships, but I think it's really important. And I think one of the things that was important to me was to get people thinking beyond their own perspective of how they use transit, but hearing other perspectives and you know, learning from that. And I was super excited because even though we're not at the end and we haven't even gotten recommendations, our training team heard a lot about sensitivity training and the need for that from the data. And they immediately talked with Rutgers and learned about the partnership that we had with an LGBTQ nonprofit where we held our focus groups. And they started working with them to develop the training module to start implementing, even before we're at recommendations. So I think it can start with baby steps. And to me, I feel like that was a good baby step in the right direction. So.
Thanks, Susan. Chelsea.
Yeah, I think, you know, the idea of going back to the same people who we've spoken to already, to ask for their direct feedback on how our resources are shaping up, how the tools are going to land in their agency, and how they're going to meet the needs of the women that are either represented by the community-based organizations or by the transit advocacy groups that we spoke with, I think was a really important part of our research approach. And I think the idea of having sort of an ongoing focus group or committee input and institutionalizing feedback about program development and policy development at the agency that way would be a fantastic thing for an agency to pick up. And I think will probably make its way into our community engagement and communications recommendations as the tools that we develop for that space shape up in that area.
Thank you. And actually, so I want to pivot because you mentioned this idea of institutionalizing, and I'm going to start with a question directed at SEPTA. So Deanna and Missy, so you mentioned that you had your Women's Safety Council, and it was kind of modeled in some of the stuff that was done at BART and done at LA Metro. And I guess starting with you, but then opening up for everyone, you know, how do we ensure that women can be more adequately represented in those transit agency decisions and leadership, which I'm guessing is a lot of what's coming out of that Women's Safety Council.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate at SEPTA. We have a lot of women leaders at SEPTA. In our division leaders, obviously, Leslie spoke earlier today. As our GM, our chief of staff is female, our planning division lead is a female, and we just have a really strong representation to that area. So we are naturally getting those perspectives that I think maybe SEPTA didn't have before, and that executive leadership formed this group, and membership is open to anyone. We have males in our group. It's not just a solely female group, but I think it's just starting the conversations, because everyone, especially in a large agency like ours, there are so many we have over 9,000 employees and 8 divisions. We can't possibly know every minute thing that's going on. But when we bring these representation back, and then those conversations go back into those divisions, it starts become inherent. The more we do things, it just becomes a pervasive item of, we do consider that women's perspective, or they'll bring something to the group that I can then elevate with leadership and have an executive sponsor to that, to make traction on these women's issues.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm wondering if others have kind of suggestions for how do we more institutionalize this and get women, you know, more adequately represented in these agency decision making.
I'll jump in. I think in the last several years, like I mentioned earlier, we instituted company employee resource groups, and our women's group is really active. We've moved a lot of different initiatives from, we have a whole human trafficking initiative. I know SEPTA's done a lot of stuff. Leslie Richards is on the DOT committee. We're the Traveling with Children page we're trying to work on. Someone in the group was really interested from bus planning, wanting to do that. So I think that's been a helpful, at least in my perspective here.
I
hate to, I want to jump back in quickly, because I did forget to mention this past time, even before our Women's Safety Committee, we have an organization called Women in Transit that is a super strong organization at SEPTA, who really has helped bring that perspective to women's issues on, and the committee kind of came out of that. So I don't want to neglect to give them a shout out, and that group and the work that they've done at SEPTA as well, to give that perspective.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, no, folks, you know, this is an open discussion. Jump in at any time. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. And Chelsea, I'm going to kind of start with you on this one. And again, others chime in. But, you know, you've had this role, fair and peers, you're working on the TCRP current study. You had that major involvement with the LA Metro study. So, you know, when you think about all the work that you've been doing, and the research that you've read, and the folks that you've been talking with in interviews and surveys and focus groups, what do you think of as the biggest barriers that prevent some of these solutions regarding, you know, women's experiences in transit from getting implemented, you know, across a variety of contexts, whether it's urban, you know, different regions, you know, why aren't we seeing more action yet?
That's a great question. I think the main issue that I have seen sort of over and over again is that this is still considered to be sort of a specialized issue area. And it does not sort of resonate or amplify to the level of improving the system for everybody if you improve the system for women. And I think there are some spaces in which that statement isn't 100% true all of the time. So I want to be clear that, like, just because most of the time, if we improve the system for women, there are tensions that exist. For example, the space constraint on the bus between someone in a wheelchair and someone on a stroller is real, and that tension needs to be worked through. So if we were to just simply go through and allow strollers all over the place, right, we may create other tensions with other rider groups that have really important needs. So I don't want to sort of oversimplify, but I think the importance of meeting the needs of women who on many systems constitute at least 50% of the ridership, just simply hasn't sort of escalated to the level of awareness at the top and become sort of embodied in a strategic plan or a critical goal to serve riders. And I see it as something that can really become part of a broader approach towards customer experience of riders. And if we meet the needs and improve the customer experience for women, if we can show the direct connection to how we're improving the experience for all riders, I think that will help strengthen that business case and really escalate it to become something that is not just a women's issue, but it's something that really improves the system for all riders. And I think because it hasn't quite escalated to that level yet, it's still seen as something that will take extra resources to do, when really it's not additive to the resources that are required for staff to focus on in an agency. It's a different way of thinking about things. It's a different lens that you put over your existing work, not additional work that you have to take on. So I think that concern about resources and staff capacity has been also not quite communicated in a way that's been really easy for agencies to just pick up and sort of say, yes, we're going to start looking at things through this lens. Everything we do, it's not going to add workload. It's just going to change how we're thinking about things a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we'll use this as kind of the last opportunity to get each of you to have a thought or contribute to the conversation, because I know we've got time constraint with the next session coming up. So I'm wondering if others have some thought on that. You know, maybe Jenna, from your experience at BART or New Jersey Transit or SEPTA, what are some of the barriers you're seeing?
I'll jump in again. I mean, one of the first things we heard in our meeting with the stakeholders was, why are we doing this? Why is this important? You know, so getting people to understand. And my argument was, as you said, Chelsea, that in some markets, like our bus market, more than 50% of the riders are women. In other markets, it's the different switch. But if you add the LGBTQ community, we've got 50% of our riders. Why are we not doing this? Was my first argument. And then the second one, I happened to listen to a really good webinar about accessibility things. And they started talking about all the different things that were designed to make life more accessible for people with disabilities, like closed captioning, adjustable chairs. Who's benefiting from that? I don't have a disability, but I use all of that, you know, and it really has a much broader benefit. So everything Chelsea said, spot on. I 100% agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add to that. It's interesting to hear both of you have that perspective, because my transit's a new career for me. I was an educator for 25 years, and a huge piece of education, theory in education, is universal design for learning. And it's lessons that benefit those that need accessibility are good for everyone. And I have brought that conversation time and again to meetings that I sit in transit. And I think my colleagues now know what universal design for learning is. They have this little peek into education, because it's true. The things we can do for those that have needs benefit everyone. And if we can get through that lens of knowing that, then we're going to move everyone forward and benefit those that need. But who doesn't want to be more safe? And all of these things that make women feel more safe make all people feel more safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think I have many things to add on this one, but I think everybody has spoken exactly to what we're looking at, is that I think historically transit has really baked its focus on kind of a monolithic rider, right? And I think even saying women is like us trying to align to that thinking, right? Well, if we can just get women in there as a monolithic. And however, I do think the more, what we saw, even the young girls and gender expansive youth, or even what they're saying versus a kind of a broader women or BIPOC communities, or, you know, as you disaggregate that dialogue, you learn more and more, and it makes your system more welcoming, more, you know, but that's not where we come from. So it's like all these, you know, it's like so many other challenges of like, let's stop looking at something with a monolithic lens. And because we will all benefit from all being welcome into a system.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you. Want to shout out to my co-moderator, Carrie, and to Caltrans for helping bring this work together. I really enjoyed the conversation. I scribbled so many notes. We could have talked for another 2 hours, but I know we have another session coming up. So I'll turn it over to you, Chad, to wrap us up and move our audience on to the next topic.
Well, thank you so much, Hillary. Thank you, everybody, for your participation in this very interesting panel today. Really appreciate your time and your insight. So, Hillary, Carrie, everybody else, thank you so much. And we hope to hear more from your research and practice in the future then. So take care, everybody.
Thank you very much, Chad. Welcome, folks, to the session on homelessness and transit. My name is Suresh Ratnam. I'm with the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, and I will be the moderator. Post-pandemic homelessness has been greatly exacerbated with unhoused people taking shelter in public spaces, especially in transit environments. So today's session is very topical to understand this situation and explore humane solutions to this very complicated problem. Our first presenter is Jerome Kiriasi. Jerome is a transit planner with the Humboldt Transit Authority, HTA, a joint powers agency operating multiple fixed route and on-demand transit systems in Humboldt County, California. Along with day-to-day planning and operations, Jerome supports HTA's efforts as a lead implementing agency for the region's aggressive VMT reduction targets and HTA's transition to a zero-emission hydrogen fleet. Prior to working at Humboldt Transit Agency, Jerome worked as a senior research engineer with the Schatz Energy Research Center at Cal Poly Humboldt. Thank you. Take it away, Jerome.
Great, thank you, Suresh. Let me share my screen here. And hopefully that's all showing correctly. Great, so thank you for the introduction. My name is Jerome Kiriasi, and with Humboldt Transit Authority. My goal here today really is to present what Humboldt Transit has been experiencing with regards to just safety, the feeling of safety around our infrastructure, and particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic, and just I think what we're all sort of seeing a rise in activity around in public spaces. We have not really explored any solutions, so I think really I'm just presenting what our experience is to date. I did not include a slide mistakenly regarding where we're at. We're quite a rural area. We are located in far northern California, quite a ways north of the San Francisco Bay Area, about a 6-hour drive. We're quite remote. We're on the coast, about an hour and a half south of the Oregon border. The entire county of Humboldt is about 130,000 people, and we operate a fleet of about 50 vehicles, and we carry currently, and are trying to grow back to pre-pandemic levels, but currently we're carrying about 650,000 trips per year. So regarding this topic, I think I wanted to highlight our key takeaways before diving into some more details, and just noting that we have been experiencing a significant increase in incidents of unsafe and threatening behavior in our public spaces, particularly within our transit shelters. Not so much on our buses, but definitely within our transit shelters. We do see this safety issue as a separate issue from houselessness, although there is certainly an overlap there, but I think it's important to separate out those two issues. And really noting that transit is here to serve everyone. We want to see everyone ride the bus, right? We're not trying to exclude houseless people from using public transit. And often, you know, we don't necessarily see evidence that houseless people can be sort of targeted as the cause for some of the safety issues and concerns that we've been having in our public, in our infrastructure. So I think it's just important to note that houselessness is not necessarily a cause of this issue. Let's see. And really where, you know, sort of a bigger picture, we have very, you know, as many other transit agencies do, and especially within California, we have very aggressive vehicle miles traveled reduction targets to meet climate change, to meet the crisis of climate change, among other issues. And here in Humboldt County, we have an 8-fold ridership increase by 2040 target, an extremely aggressive growth in a rural area. And you know, all the different factors that go into trying to make that happen. And I think really underpinning all of that, or a really important requirement, is that our passengers need to feel safe and comfortable. And if there's a significant issue there that undermines that feeling of safety and comfort, it can really undermine this broader effort as a whole. We've been, over this last year, in response to a lot of what we've been experiencing with these challenges, we've started collecting data, and both through internal logging of our response to incidents, our calls to police in response, and really trying to get a little bit of a better handle on what we're experiencing and present some numbers, so that we can have dialogues like this. The chart here on the left is from data taken from the City of Eureka Police Department. City of Eureka is the largest and most populated city in Humboldt County. It's kind of the county seat, and the vast majority of our challenges occur within this area. And you can kind of see a breakdown of how they have labeled our calls to them regarding sort of the different types of issues that we've been trying to grapple. A lot of it is really disturbance and sort of occupying our structures, with, you know, I guess I want to say, you know, camping. We do see camping pretty regularly, and while that is an issue, camping tends to present, I would say camping is less of a safety concern than a lot of issues we see around just simply occupying public stops for drinking or drug use, or basically less as a shelter and more of a place to do things that are unsafe. And a lot of times that can result in confrontations with passengers, confrontations with drivers, and sort of what we would categorize as unsafe behavior or threatening behavior versus people simply looking for a place to live, or welfare checks where people just simply don't have a place to go, or they don't have the social services that they need. And again, a lot of times there's overlap there, but it's really the sort of the violence and the threatening behavior. That's the stuff that we're particularly concerned about at the moment. We've done some internal logging of our incidents and sort of label them slightly differently. And so kind of correlating, kind of took out traffic offenses and other as not really relating to this topic. The rest of those sort of police reports, they do relate to what we're talking about. And on the right is our internal sort of breakout of largely what we're working with. And occupation is, we haven't broken out sort of the difference between sort of just simply camping versus occupying and doing activities that are concerning to might make passengers feel unsafe. So we haven't sort of distinguished that out, but it is a pretty significant percentage of those occupation sort of labeled incidents. Actual incidents of violence or threat have been relatively low, but are there, and they're increasing. And one thing to note is, I think pre-pandemic, it was not uncommon for our internal staff to go out into the field and respond to complaints, or incidents that are called in. And now we simply call the police every time. We've had too many issues that were unsafe to our staff. Just trying to come up with some metrics to, another way to look at what our experience is. We average about one incident every 3 to 4 weekdays, and the max number of incidents we've logged, but this is roughly in the last year to year and a half, have been 3 to 5 incidents in one day. But sort of couching it into how big of a system we are. We're a relatively small transit system compared to many others, large metropolitan ones. So showing this is, how many passenger trips per incident, or how many passenger miles per incident. I also took we noted that about 84% of our incidents are called in by our drivers. So I scaled the incident per weekday by how many eyes are on the road within the city boundaries at any given point in time, just to kind of, making up another metric to help sort of with this discussion. And just some sort of key points that capture our experience. To date, we've taken some, reactionary actions. I'd say most of them are punitive, which is unfortunate. We don't really have any program or policy in place at this point, whereas you might see programs in place in metropolitan areas. We just don't have the resources or the funding to really try to create a separate program to try to tackle this. So really most of our actions have been in collaboration with police departments, and I think really a lot of those have been punitive to date. Also, it's really impacted our amenities that we're able to offer our passengers. We typically don't proactively remove infrastructure or amenities. We have in a couple of instances. The majority of the time, we're getting approached by the city or by the police or by a business owner to, being pressured into removing benches or shelters. And, that infrastructure being seen as a cause for this type of behavior rather than a place where there's, where this behavior is a symptom that's sort of being seen openly. It's easier, I think, for people to blame transit. I think it's also important to say that, right, as of now, this removing infrastructure has impacted about 10% of all of our stops in Eureka, and about a quarter of all the stops that had shelters or benches prior to sort of us taking a more being approached by the city and by the police. And I think Chad had sent out some questions that I think he sort of to set the tone for what he would like presentations to try to address. And, again, we're sort of in this position, where we're at is sort of continue to react to this. We have not put together any kind of solutions or program or policy. So I thought I'd go through and just sort of offer brief answers to some of these questions. And I'm happy to sort of talk a bit more about these through the follow-up Q&A if you would like. I think, again, sort of driving home that I think it's important to note that sort of just the compounding challenges with the challenges that local governments are having in providing the social services necessary across all sorts of different services, such as healthcare or housing, and that it can be easy to sort of blame transit as a source for the behavior that's a symptom for these larger challenges. And so I kind of struck out what can transit authorities do, or how can we work with social service agencies. I think the question needs to be, these other agencies are trying to address this issue, and we're happy to move people where they need to go to get these services, rather than seeing public transit, public infrastructure as a thing that we need to change. At least that's my hope. And then, again, driving home that what we're really concerned about is the safety of our passengers. We don't care if they're homeless or not. And I think with that, that's my time.
Thank you very much, Jerome. Appreciate the level of detail. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is John MacArthur. He's a Sustainable Transportation Program Manager at the Transportation Research and Education Center, TREC, at Portland State University. He is active in research related to sustainable and equitable transportation, particularly in the areas of emerging technologies, e-bikes, bike share, transit, and the relationship between transportation and public health. He currently is the section chair of PRB's Transportation and Society section. He received his BS in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University and an MS in Environmental Health and Sciences from the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan. Over to you, John.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, yeah. First of all, thanks for letting me have the opportunity to talk about this report and work that we were lucky to get. And it's fascinating research report that we put out with TCRP on homelessness in a guide for public transportation. And also, I think, Jerome, your presentation highlights a lot of the issues that public transportation agencies are facing right now and struggle with, that is outside their core mission of providing transit and transportation options for people. And so I'm going to jump in here on this report. The objective of the research was to develop a guide for agencies and concerned stakeholders on effective approaches and best practices related to people experiencing homelessness on the system. And transit has to bear the burden of other social policy failures, from housing to public safety, that it's hard for transportation agencies because they are not designed for housing people, but it has become their issue, their responsibility by necessity to face this growing issue, but not just by themselves, but as a partner with other agencies and the communities in which they provide services. And I'm going to be going over this report. Luckily, we're going to have an expert that comes next to me, Ken Drivers from SEPTA, to really jump in on what they're doing. But I'm going to give you kind of a high level kind of view of this issue, but also kind of the elements of the report. In really that it's providing a all hands approach kind of idea for providing safe and inclusive experience for riders, but also for employees of the agency. So just to give you a little context, homelessness is not in the U.S. has been there for many years. Unfortunately, a lot of those reductions that we've had in housing individuals over the years is back up about at 2007 levels, and many of you all have seen that, and the communities are still facing this, and particularly post pandemic times here. But just to give you, it's seen at all different levels, and we're looking at the difference between unsheltered and sheltered. About 40% of individuals that are facing homelessness are unsheltered, and that is seen at different levels across different demographics, where you see, chronically homeless individuals are facing are unsheltered much more often than sheltered, versus unaccounted youth and people with families. So it has a dramatic effect across all these demographics. Just briefly, I highlight, the causes of homelessness are really around lack of affordable housing, the systemic, policy issues of unemployment, poverty, eviction. There's not just one cause, there's many causes, but there's also these confounding factors that also contribute to the numbers that we see in our communities, but also seen on the system. But we are also seeing disproportionate rates of people that face homelessness that are people of color and low-income individuals. And this is why an all-hands, all disciplines approach is really needed to kind of face this very sticky and challenging problem. Just briefly, so this report, we did a lit review, kind of agency scan, and then we kind of focused on interviews around case studies of these kind of metropolitan areas, in Philadelphia being one of them, and you'll hear about that here in a second. But also, we were lucky that there is a group, and so if you are a public transit agency or even a community and city that is wanting to engage on this topic area, there is a group, a homelessness and vulnerable populations work group is now a subcommittee at APTA, and it's like-minded, or I should say transit agencies that are facing this issue, that want to learn and face this issue together and share experiences, and so this is a active work group. So if you are interested, I can give you more information, but they were invaluable in building out this report. Just kind of briefly through our scans and work, there's a great group down at UCLA that did some reports and surveys that, we're seeing agencies kind of take broad, approaches to these, both in kind of what we call push and pull strategies. There's the enforcement side on kind of, anti-loitering laws that we're seeing. There's also kind of installation of kind of what we call hostile, kind of landscaping and elements to discourage people from sleeping and spending time on the systems. But there are also these supportive programs. And what we saw in our scan is these kind of agencies that we talked to, that there's a full range of types of programs that these agencies are doing, from having outreach teams on the system, fare reductions, down to on-site homeless services, which is a much smaller subset. And so that helped inform our development of the guide. Additional themes that we saw as we talked to and did the surveys is the importance of leadership in addressing these issues in building programs. Probably the most important thing is the external collaborations and partnerships, and that transit agencies don't have the expertise or the resources to do this single-handedly. Transit agencies, facilities are shared owned facilities with the communities in which they're serving, and partnerships are just critical. Agencies are also rethinking enforcement, and then just the need of more data, more metrics, and funding is a lot of issues that we saw brought up. So briefly, the report is set up in these kind of 4 components, and I'll go over those quickly here. So the first one is really kind of like what transit agencies do, right? Is providing access to mobility to all users. But there are ways in which transit agencies can help people that are experiencing homelessness or unhoused to have a pathway out of that and to kind of permanent housing, to shelter, to supportive services. So we saw and see transit agencies providing access to essential services, to shelters, to other supportive services. They do that by low income and discounted and free programs, so that those individuals that are struggling can use the system appropriately and get to those providers and places that they need to go. But also on the other side is kind of rethinking this, the enforcement side of things, looking at fair compliance, decriminalizing or de-emphasizing minor infractions for these individuals, because really the main issue is really getting those people to the services they need, and not looking at putting these individuals in jail or provide kind of further providing that they don't have to provide like get minor infractions that make their situation worse, I should say. So next, probably in the majority of the report, and I think where we saw agencies leaning in is around serving people experiencing homelessness. And I should say this guide is not like include a guide to say agencies should be doing all this, and it's really providing information about what is other best practices. But we saw agencies do a little bit of all these things, or focus efforts on some that they felt that they had the resources to do and that fit the community in which they're trying to serve. And so particularly around outreach services and emergency response approaches, is providing people on the system, meeting them where they are, and most of the times, in the system, and getting them to the services that they need. And some of that can be done by the transit agencies themselves, but often it's about that partnership and getting them to those services and those partners that can also help these individuals. The report talks about transit agency staff roles, kind of where if you have transit police and security staff, what their roles can be, versus kind of these other approaches in crisis management staff. And then what we've seen over the last couple of years is the I guess the influx or support of ambassador programs, and those could be actual homeless outreach response teams, but they can also be transit employees that are out there engaging with the individuals on the system, and that can both be a way in which what we've seen as an effective approach to de-escalate the engagement, where a police officer, just by them being a individual security staff, may create tensions that are unnecessary. So providing the support, the training for these individuals to be effective on the system, and that can be crisis intervention training, de-escalation training, and then just general awareness training to all employees. And so that can be effective not only for the front first responders and people that are engaging with people day to day, but everybody within the agency. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse. I have a little coming over a cold, so I apologize for my voice. The next section is around the actual land, facilities, and public spaces, what transit agencies are doing to provide that safe and inclusive environment for everyone on the system, but also looking at ways in which they can help individuals utilize public spaces appropriately, but also how to address issues around encampments that may provide barriers or unsafe situations for other people using the system. And that, and we talk about public restrooms in the report, the use of public transportation facilities. That often you know that transit agencies are often in the front line during emergencies, both in cold events, but also heat events where those can be warming centers, and also ways to get people to services during emergencies. And then lastly, we've seen is the growth of alternative housing and shelters on public transit facilities and land, where the agency has partnered with both the city and other partners to provide places for short-term housing or short-term shelters, safe places for housing. And this isn't in the report, but most recently, Texas DOT created Esperanza Community. And what I think is interesting here, it shows where a transportation department can help create places for short-term shelters, but that can be pathways to get people to social services and be a temporary place in which these people can find shelters. And why this is also, a good example is the linkage with the transit agency, Cap Metro there, where this facility is placed at a location where those individuals can access transit. They are provided free transit to both training and job opportunities to get those people moved through into permanent safe homes. Finally, the report talks about program implementation, this idea of launching and developing programs from pilot programs to more comprehensive approaches that we'll hear from SEPTA and Ken will be talking about here shortly, but also building support, both agency leadership, internal buy-in, and then engagement both on all riders that around engaging them and educating them about what the agency is doing to help be supportive to these individuals. Lastly, I just want to point out that there's another report that came out roughly around the same time. It's around strategies to address homelessness at airports, and why this is so important and really connects to the work that we did at the TCRP report is often mass transit is a terminus. It ends at airports, and that kind of partnership, working with airports and airport agencies and facilities, and what is the transit's role in providing support around people facing homelessness, and where can they work together with transit airport facilities? And I think this report's a good report to talk about. So more work is needed, though. Evaluation of these programs, particularly around cost analysis and effectiveness of these type of homeless outreach programs, on-site services, and the like. Development of data, Development of a knowledge exchange. I think this working group with APTA is a great first place to share policies, procedures, job descriptions, training. But there's also a lot of questions around funding of these programs. And I think more work needs to be looked at on how we can, fund these programs and fund the partnerships. So here's my contact information, and I will pass it off for the next presentation.
John, it's a great summary of your report, and I really appreciate all the thought-provoking things you said, especially the partnership between Texas DOT and transit agencies. That's a note to ourselves. Thank you. Our next speaker is Kenneth Divers. Kenneth is the Director of Outreach Programs for the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, SEPTA, leading SEPTA's response to the complex issue of homelessness, and leads the safety, cleaning, ownership, partnerships, and engagement SCOPE program. Ken developed the SCOPE program to bring a holistic, compassionate approach to providing a safe and welcoming travel experience for riders, ensuring a secure environment for employees, and actively connecting vulnerable persons to vital services and care. SEPTA's SCOPE program has received APTA's 2022 Innovation Award, 4 legislative proclamations, as well as a number of other awards and accolades. Over to you, Kenneth.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to some, and good morning to others, depending on where you are. I don't know if you all can see me or see my screen. Am I up? Great, terrific. Here at SEPTA in Philadelphia, we actually created an outreach programs department back in 2022. Prior to that, we developed the SCOPE program. SCOPE is an acronym which stands for Safety, Cleaning, Ownership, Partnership, and Engagement. And our mission, as you see on your screen, is to make homelessness on SEPTA rare, brief, and non-recurring, while creating an environment that is clean and safe for our employees and our riders. That is what our mission statement is. I think John said it, and as well as Jerome, is that unfortunately transit companies had to delve into cases of dealing with members of the vulnerable community. So these are some of the things that we had to put in place. The agenda, real quick, I am going to be true to that 15-minute. Let me just start my little clock here. There we go. So we're going to go over the SEPTA system, the SCOPE program, strategic partnerships and outreach, the resource data and customer service, consistent challenges, and feedback. SEPTA is the 6th largest transportation company in North America. We have a little over 700,000 daily trips. We have about 13,000 bus and trolley stops with 285 subway and rail stations. You heard me say earlier, in 2021, as a direct result of members of the vulnerable community seeking respite on the SEPTA system, we had to develop this program, safety, cleaning, ownership, partnership, and engagement. I'm not going to go over all of these. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I will make it available to all of you in a slide deck. And we're just going to go over some items of the SCOPE program. We're bolstering outreach. Basically, what we do is that we hired a first in the nation. Back in 2021, we partnered with a local university, Drexel University, and we onboarded at that time 15 first-year medical students. And we dubbed them health navigators. And these medical students come on the SEPTA system, engage members of the vulnerable community to lead them off the system and into places of respite, while at the same time providing extremely minor wound care or first aid, extremely minor, such as cuts and bruises. Co-responder model, something that was championed by a good friend of mine in RDT. They championed the co-responder model. I don't really have a huge foot in the co-responder model because I like to divide the outreach from police officers so that we can do a greater impact in our transit system. But we do have a small component of the co-responder model. Security guards, we do have them on our system. At the bottom left, you see police and transportation managers, and the bottom right, you see 2 outreach firms that we do have a contract with, Northeast Treatment Center, AKA NET, and Marquee Parkside Recovery. We also have partnerships with local organizations, and this actually is a national organization called Covenant House. Covenant House, many of you may be familiar with it. They are together working with SEPTA. They stop homelessness and sex trafficking with young folks on the transit system. Again, just year to date in 24, they usually have them at 2 stations on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So together, they had about 394 engagements. And a lot of these engagements remove people off the system, these young folks off the system, and into places where they can get assistance. We also have a relationship with Savage Sisters. This is a recovery and nonprofit offering vulnerable individuals with vital care and resources. You can look at the screen here. Again, I'm not going to read all of this, but I will make this available to everyone. But again, they have huge impact coming on the SEPTA system. And what I like to point out about this is all of these partnerships, except for Northeast Treatment Center and Marikey, all of these partnerships are in-kind partners. In other words, we do not pay them at all. We also have a relationship with the Department of Public Health. They give us free of charge what we call NRT kits, nicotine replacement therapy. What are they? Nicotine patches, nicotine gum, and nicotine lozenges. So our outreach team are given these nicotine replacement therapy kits so that when they engage SEPTA customers, not just the homeless or the vulnerables, but every SEPTA customer that they see smoking on the system, we engage them. Just this year to date, we had engaged about 12,009 customers smoking on the SEPTA system. And simply by the power of ask, 9,416 stopped simply because we asked them to. We were able to give away 168 NRT kits, something we're very proud of. We're forging additional partnerships. These are just some. Drexel University, Town Watch, our local Town Watch in the city of Philadelphia. We just developed a relationship and a partnership with them. Penn Medicine with their homeless outreach project. We are developing a relationship with Widener University with their physician assistant students that's coming very soon in hopefully spring of 2025. We have a relationship with the National Center for Urban Solutions. What that is, they help address at-risk youth on the transit system. And let me just remind you, all of these partnerships that I'm sharing with you are all in kind. It is not costing us a dime. We also have a relationship with the School District of Philadelphia, Office of School Climate and Safety. We have, I believe it's a monthly meeting with them, and so many others. I'm not going to go over all of this, but I want to get through the presentation to leave room for questions. Where are we doing? How are we doing? So year to date for Q1, Q2, and Q3 of 2024, our SEPTA outreach team recorded 108,441 engagements. Now, you see an asterisk there where it says engagements. We teach our team that each engagement equals a removal off the system, whether it is a removal into a place of respite, such as housing, mental health, behavioral health treatment centers, or if they refuse, we don't kick people off the system, but we gently ask them to leave the system. And year to date, 108,000 individual removals off the system. Now, let me just put that into perspective. These are not unique individuals. These are not 108,000 different individuals. We may encounter one person 10 times, 12 times, but remember, each engagement equals a removal. I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but what I want to draw your attention to is at the bottom right, we had 1,191 warm handoffs. Now, these are actually single individuals who re-guided off the system and into places of respite. We had about 225 Narcan overdose reversals, Narcan deployments, and year to date of 24. And as you can see here at the top, you heard me talk about the 12,009 smokers engaged and 9,400 stopped simply by the power of ask. What does that look like? I wanted to do a comparison of where we are year to date compared to all of last year. All of last year, the blue represents calendar year 23, and of course the brown represents year to date of 24 from January to September. We have already eclipsing our numbers from all of last year. Last year to date was 84,000 removals off the system. To date, we have 108,000. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is here for your viewing pleasure. We do also look at our staffing levels. What does that look like? We hire certified peer specialists. So we do not hire, I mean, I'm going to spend a couple seconds on this. We do not hire here at SEPTA, we do not hire clinicians or behavioral health specialists. We hire what we call certified peer specialists. These are people who have lived experience, who come on the system, engage members of the community where they used to be, and to help them get off the system or in the places of respite. So we're very proud of that. In 2024-23, Outreach and SEPTA Police, we had saved about 724 lives via Narcan doses. Year to date, we already eclipsed that, and we're at 771. And I myself personally sit on Philadelphia Fire Department's Alternative Response Unit 2 and Alternative Response Unit 3. What are they? AR2 addresses opioid and substance use disorder, where AR3 addresses behavioral and mental health issues here in the Kensington section of Philadelphia. And because of these wonderful partnerships, we saw a net savings of $155,633.24. Also, in 2022, we realized that there were 562 people experiencing homelessness on SEPTA. We did our annual point in time count, AKA PIT count. We did another count in 2023, January, and we realized a 35% reduction in homelessness to 363. Not to be outdone, in 2024, just this past January, we realized an additional 14% reduction in homelessness to 314. So cumulatively, since we began this program, we realized a net reduction of 44% in homelessness. These are what are our customers saying? What are they showing us? What are they telling us? The graph to the left represents Q2 of 24. The graph to the right represents Q3 of 24. So you can see that we are trending in the right direction, but you'll see a little uptick in the month of August. For some reason, there was an anomaly here in Philadelphia while there was a huge uptick in homelessness, but we did recover quickly, and and because of the colder months, you start seeing it tick up, but our teams are on it. We are creating a system that is safe and interconnected. We have SEPTA Police, our partners, various partnerships, our health navigators, our security cards, and so many others. And that is what we're here to do. However, even with all the actions we are taking to address this intertwined public health crisis of homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health issues, and you heard Jerome talk about that as well as John, SEPTA system continues to be overwhelmed by the vulnerable population, right? And this is not new. Time and time again, our outreach workers engage members of the vulnerable community to refer them to services, only to have them come right back on our system in a revolving door effect. More help is needed. So that's why we are not, and I say this again, I want to remind you all about our mission statement. Our mission statement is to make homelessness on SEPTA rare, brief, and non-recurring, while creating an environment that is clean and safe for our employees and our customers, period. Some of our challenges is we have systemic barriers within the city of Philadelphia and also our surrounding counties. Some of those barriers are inadequate housing, case management and voluntary committals, supportive services, inadequate shelters, inadequate treatment beds, little coordination, bad communication, and in some cases, even soil services. So these are the things that we are challenged with. However, as you heard, I forgot about this. So what we do here is we actually created a resource repository. I want to direct your attention to our SEPTA's website under septa.org. In it, you'll click on the safety tab, and then you'll see the scope program. In that website, that microsite, that is our program for my department. You'll see a lot of information that I'm not able to get to on this call, this brief call, but you'll see a resource repository. The card to your right, the top blue is the front of the card, the bottom left is the back of that one card. And that is an idea, shout out to RDT. That is an idea I got from RDT over there in Denver. And we created a similar type of model here in the city of Philadelphia at SEPTA. So very proud of that, very proud of that. And as John mentioned, in 2022, our SCOPE program won APTA's Innovation Award, something that we're very proud of. And I'm going to leave you with this 1-minute video with the remaining 3 minutes and 14 seconds I have left. I'm going to share with you and close with a 1-minute video of our SCOPE program. Enjoy. Hopefully you can hear it. Let me know if you can't hear it, please.
On any given day, in the poorest big city in the United States, SEPTA stations and vehicles are sometimes the only refuge for vulnerable individuals experiencing homelessness, substance use disorders, and mental illness, a challenge heightened by the pandemic. As the anchor for the region's recovery, SEPTA developed the SCOPE program to bring a holistic, compassionate approach to providing a welcoming travel experience for returning customers, ensuring a secure environment for employees, and connecting vulnerable people to vital services and care. This unified response allows SEPTA to maximize personnel, establish a culture of employee engagement, and develop partnerships with diverse outreach specialists and stakeholders.
Sheltering on transit isn't safe for anyone, and working with the SCOPE team helps us actually engage people where they are. Through contact and trust, we're able to create pathways to housing, health services, and employment for individuals that are seeking these services.
Transit is the way we connect to each other. Through SCOPE, SEPTA's 9,000 employees are finding new ways to fulfill that mission every day.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, my friend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. That was a very inspirational and informative presentation. I'm sure we will be reaching out to you for pointers soon. And Chad, I guess we move on to the Q&A portion of this presentation.
Absolutely, yes. Let me go ahead and take one question. I'm going to put it in the chat as well as read out loud, just so you have a version of this. So the question is, it sounds like SEPTA has had a lot of success in its transit outreach efforts. As Ken was saying, SEPTA is one of the largest transit agencies in the United States and has access to a lot of resources. How might some of these resources be scalable across transit agency size? For example, I'm thinking of Jerome's agency in rural Northern California. I'm wondering what, based on your experience, Ken, and also your perspective, Jerome, and as well as you, John, how these might be applicable across agencies.
Yeah, this is a common question, Chad, that I get when I do speak across the country is one thing about the SCOPE program, and let me just repeat the acronym: safety, cleaning, ownership, partnership, and engagement. I want to highlight two things: the ownership and the partnership. Many believe, as John said, and he's so right what he said earlier, and Jerome kind of intimated it, well, actually he came out and said it, and he's true and he's right, is that we did not create this problem. Transit companies found itself downstream from this humanitarian crisis that found its way on this transit system. So because of that, we have to look at innovative ways. See, that was my timer. We had to look at innovative ways to address this issue. So one thing that we are proud of, you heard me talk about that $155,000 savings. The reason why we did that is that we had to point the finger back to our city, point the finger back to our state legislator, point the finger back to our county COCs, right? Continuum of care, our homeless service provider, and say, listen, this is an issue that we're not equipped to deal with. So they were able to take ownership and they were able to partner with us. And you heard me say this, that in kind, all of these partnerships are not costing us a dime. Even though we are a sixth largest transportation company, we are hemorrhaging, like a lot of transit companies, money. We don't have the resources. People have that misconception. We just do not. So one of the challenges that we have, and I'm gonna say this in closing, is that I try to encourage our other sister agencies who do not have a larger system, is to create partnerships and celebrate the heck out of those partnerships. I don't care if that needle moves 1 point, you celebrate the heck out of that needle, because what it does, it builds trust and people want to come on and be a part of the solution.
So thank you. John?
Yeah, I mean, I would just iterate, I think Ken is exactly right, and SEPTA has done amazing work and is a model, and I think it's a scalable model. I mean, I think, many of the things Ken as laid out in the SCOPE program is any agency could do it at a different, whatever scalable works for them. But it's the approach that I think is very effective. And also just even if you look at the report and it's also scalable in that you can lean into those parts that fit your community and your agency and the issues that are you're most facing, and then build out from a pilot program. Like a lot of agencies we saw started out piloting, a homeless response team or ambassador team, and using that to show, figure out how it works, show effectiveness, create partnerships, and then build off those successes, like Ken said, to then scale it larger. So a lot of it is proof of concept. It's just showing and getting buy-in from internal to external, to then show that it's worth, and it can be cost effective. You might be spending X amount of dollars on the maintenance side or the operations side, that by leaning in more on the upstream side of things, you could minimize some of the downstream impacts that you see on the system when you don't address those upstream things. So yeah, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Anything from your perspective, Jerome?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think there's some very good ideas that were presented here, and I think the challenge, I think probably from a small agency like us, where if you take away the drivers, we're a staff size of 13, that the challenge is just simply feeling overwhelmed. And I think we certainly do have partnerships. We've grown a partnership with the Eureka City Police. We have not celebrated it. I think that is a fantastic point. We do have a partnership with a local religious organization that they do provide cleaning services, and they do go out and they engage with people to point them to services, and we have signed a contract with them. Outside of that, I think just the context of rural, where we have 2 hospitals in the area and 1 is up for sale. We have our Department of Health and Human Services is constantly struggling with retaining staff. And so it's, and I know that those problems also scale to larger entities as well. And I think when we're talking about 2 hospitals versus 8 or 9, it starts to just get really overwhelming and challenging. But outside of that, I think there's certainly a lot more we can do, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Excellent.
And you had a comment? You put your hand up.
Yeah, I saw that we only had 2 minutes left, so I put it down. I was going to comment on what Jerome said, but I want to be respectful of the time.
Still, we can go a minute over just to hear your point of view.
Okay, so Jerome, I would love to speak to you offline, just to give you a little encouragement. When we had the developed relationship with Drexel University with 15 first-year medical students, this cohort is now 21, believe it or not. We wanted to do I wanted to do a press conference, right? They were a little hesitant because it was new. No other transit company was doing it across North America. So they were hesitant. However, we developed a relationship with Cabrini University with 4 health and exercise science students. I reached out to them and I said, hey, let's celebrate this partnership. I want to do a press conference. They were like, absolutely, let's do it. It was so huge. We had all of the local news media channels there. We had the commissioners of the county. We had our CEO. We had the president of Cabrini University there. And as a result of that press conference, you never believe this, Jerome, Newman University and LaSalle University reached out to us to say, we want to be a part of the solution. That's why I say, no matter how small or minuscule, celebrate the heck out of those accomplishments, because you never know who's going to come knocking. And just as a matter of fact, just today, before this meeting, my team and I met with a local organization called City Truce. They called their organization is also called Peace Patrol, and they heard about what we were doing, and they want to come and give free resources insofar as relates to manpower to come on the system, to patrol the system, to be a force multiplier, extra eyes and ears on our system, not costing us a dime.
Yeah, it's great. I appreciate that. I think that's a great point, that if we don't talk about it and present what we are trying to do, then others don't know what we need. So that's a great point.
And I'll just... Can I take an extra minute to ask a question?
What?
Yeah, let me take that extra minute to ask a question. In counties where the conversation has just not taken place regarding transit and homelessness, who should initiate that? Should it be the DOT? Should it be the transit agency? Should it be the county agencies? Who is best suited to be the facilitator to get everybody talking about this?
If I may, if it's affecting your transit agency, the transit agency should be the one that that's what we do. Flora Castillo is our consultant here. I don't see her on the call. She may be in the group there looking at this, but she and I developed this program 3.5 years ago. And she was able to bring us to SEPTA, a transit company, to tables that we didn't know exist. And so, and also working with Rochelle, I'm throwing out names, I'm name dropping, Rochelle Cobrith. She's she was a manager of our government relations. Now she's in another function, but she was able to help create these meetings that we have either every month or every other week. We are the ones that initiated that because it's affecting our system. So that's just what we do, and that's how we were able to get buy-in as well.
All questions, Chad, on your end?
I mean, there may be a couple more. I think this conversation has answered a lot of the questions that we had. So yeah, I think
one thing is, I think, because this is Caltrans is this issue is that we can look at this modally, or we can look at this, systemically around transportation and how the transportation agencies, I know their boundaries end at certain physical aspects, but people go in and out of these locations. So that kind of teaming with your local DOT, your city DOT, your transit agency, the airport, all of it is transportation. And what is transportation's role and where they can help partner on this broader community systemic issue is really important. Because often I've seen some transit agencies, departments, DOTs say, well, if they're, as long as they're not on our facilities, we don't care. We're going to put up a fence. That's how we do it. That's not, going to help fix the problem, right? And so being part of the, leaning in and saying, how do we help the city DOT, which is right on the other side of that fence, or the transit agency that's right on the other side of the fence, how can they help get these people to the services they need? Because that's how you're going to ultimately fix the problem. And I know that, DOTs will have their situations where, an underpass is not a place to, have encampments because it's just not safe for anyone. So how do you manage that so that people don't go back to those places? And really it's an upstream approach, not a downstream, fence.
excellent. Really, really important questions, yeah, on how we can tie people together and help people receive the social service support that they need. Absolutely.
Thank you. So it's time to wrap up, Chad.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, Jerome, and Ken, and of course, Suresh, for this session today. Very interesting things. Great to hear what's happening throughout the United States. Different strategies that have worked. It seems like there's a lot of really positive movements in terms of helping find solutions to housing and social services for people experiencing homelessness. And so thanks everybody for your participation at the symposium today. We will have our final day tomorrow, where we'll hear from a keynote address from Susan Handy, along with other sessions. So tune in tomorrow at the regular time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Again, John, Jerome, Ken, Suresh, thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.